2025-2026. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Dépôt de projet de loi émanant de députés.
Introduction of private members' bills. First reading of Senate public bills.
Motion. Mr. Lawton, seconded by Ms. Cronus, moves that it be an instruction to the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights that during its consideration of Bill C-9, an act to amend the criminal code, hate propaganda, hate crime, and access to religious or cultural places, the committee be granted the power to travel throughout Canada to hear testimony from interested parties, and that the necessary staff do accompany the committee. Debate. The honourable member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is my great privilege to rise on behalf of the people of Elgin, St. Thomas, London South. I will be sharing my time with my esteemed colleague, the honourable member for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations. We are seeking this motion because we believe it is critical that the Justice Committee gives Bill C-9 the proper scrutiny, given the alarming details we've learned in the last few days that the Liberal government has reached a secret deal with the Bloc Québécois to have a full-out assault on the religious freedoms of Canadians. There was a story in the National Post on the weekend revealing that the Bloc Québécois' desire to remove fundamental safeguards for religious freedom from the criminal code is going to be supported by the Liberals in exchange for Bloc Québécois support on Bill C-9. Now, in the days since this, Conservatives have tried to actually do proper legislative scrutiny on Bill C-9. The Liberals dared to accuse the Conservatives of filibustering and obstructing, but I want to explain two critical things that have just happened. I realize you are now Madam Speaker. You have transformed before my eyes now, so thank you for that. The interesting thing here is that we had resources to do our committee's work on Tuesday from 3:30 p.m. when the Justice Committee meeting started until midnight. Conservative members were prepared to go line by line, clause by clause through Bill C-9. And then the Liberals adjourned the meeting at 5:30 after we had only agreed on and adopted one clause as a committee. Yesterday in question period, one of my colleagues, who is a Liberal member on the Justice Committee, got up and demanded that we continue our work Thursday. That's today, Madam Speaker. And then this morning, I look at my email and I see that the Liberal committee chair has canceled today's committee meeting. The clause-by-clause review of Bill C-9, which the Liberal government said Conservatives were obstructing, has been obstructed by the Liberals. Now, I do not ever make the mistake of accusing the Liberals of competence, but they are filibustering themselves. They are obstructing their own agenda. So the Conservatives are ready to do the work. Now, what I suspect may have happened is the Liberal government has been receiving the similar calls and emails to the ones that have been coming into my office from Canadians who are very alarmed by this amendment and in general by what C-9 means for freedom of expression and for religious freedom. They are alarmed by this. I have received calls from members of the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Christian community, Hindus, Sikhs, all of them saying that they do not trust that their religious freedoms will be preserved if the Liberal government proceeds with this secret deal it has with the Bloc Québécois to remove fundamental religious safeguards from the criminal code. Now, the Liberal government could clear this up very easily. They could come out and say that we are backing away from this. We are no longer proceeding with our plans to take aim at religious freedom. In fact, I would love to hear one of my Liberal colleagues over there say it. In fact, I hear a great deal of chatter from my Liberal colleagues now. If one of them could just get up and say that they will not be proceeding with these assaults on religious expression and freedom of religion, that would make this country a better place. But we need to do the proper work as a committee. We need to be able to speak to the Canadians affected by this, the Canadians who are alarmed by this. We need to be able to speak directly to the groups that have been excluded from the C-9 study because of this Liberal government's desire to obstruct and filibuster its own agenda. So the reason I'm rising on this motion is because we need to proceed with a proper study. We need to go into all of these communities in Canada, speak directly to those who are so often excluded from the process. I'm thinking specifically of people in ethnic communities that don't necessarily consume mainstream media and are likely better for it. I'm speaking, of course, of people in remote communities for whom accessing committee proceeding in Ottawa is a challenge. In doing this, we will be able to have a full accounting of exactly what Pandora's box the Liberal government is unleashing on Canadians with its proposed Bill C-9 and the amendments removing religious safeguards. Now, there are going to be, I suspect, some interventions from my Liberal colleagues who will say, no, we are not talking about, in general, freedom of religion. We're just talking about people that conceal hateful, criminal, violent rhetoric in religious language. Well, I have some news for those members. That is already illegal. There is no protection in the criminal code for people who incite genocide. There is no protection in the criminal code for people who threaten violence. There is no protection in the criminal code for people who incite hatred. These religious defenses in the criminal code only exist for two particular charges: the willful promotion of hatred.
I'm going to interrupt the honourable member. Can we order while a member is making a speech? There's no conversations going on. The honourable member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South.
Did she really say that? You did.
I am not going to intervene on this. Order. Can we let the honourable member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South, conclude his speech? The honourable member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just another example of Liberals trying to silence and censor people they don't agree with. This is exactly why we cannot let what they're trying to sneak in the back door on C-9 pass. This is a Liberal government that has taken every opportunity to put religious freedom and freedom of expression in its crosshairs. This is a Liberal government that freezes the bank accounts of its protesters. This is a Liberal government that, under the guise of protecting children, tries to expand the Canadian Human Rights Act to block what Canadian people can say on the internet. So absolutely, I will take no lectures from any member opposite when we are trying to protect the freedoms of Canadians of all faiths. And incidentally, what I will point out to is the fact that we cannot view any of this in isolation. These amendments to Bill C-9 must also be understood alongside the fact that the Liberal government is changing the definition of hate in Bill C-9. And in doing so, as civil liberties experts, as advocates from the political left and the political right have said, they are putting a murky definition that will make it easier to prosecute people for their thoughts and their beliefs, and in particular, for their religious expression. And if you want to know where the Liberals think about this, I would refer you to what the former Liberal Justice Committee chair said, which is that religious scriptures, and he mentioned 3 entire books of the Bible and Torah, are hateful at times. And he said that it should be criminal to quote certain scriptures. Wow. Now, we have a pluralistic country. There are people in the House of Commons and people in the Liberal Party that have a range of views. It is possible that the committee chair was out of line and not speaking for the Liberal government. And I will say that I'm very grateful that just a couple of weeks after the member who was chairing the Justice Committee said that people should be criminally prosecuted for quoting scripture, he was removed from his post. The Liberals removed him as the Justice Committee chair. Oh wait, it was to promote him. He's now the Minister of Canadian Identity. The Minister of Canadian Identity said prosecutors should be able to, I'm going to use his words, quote, press charges, unquote, against people who quote scriptures that he finds offensive, that the Liberal government finds offensive. So this is something where the Liberal government demands Conservatives go along with its agenda, and when we say, all right, let's review line by line exactly what you are trying to do, they cancel the meeting. So we do not know when the Liberal government will decide to get around to this. Perhaps they're dealing with some tumult within their own ranks on how to deal with this. I have had a number of conversations with all members of this House, and I realize there are people representing a variety of faith backgrounds who are members of Parliament for different parties. Perhaps some Liberals who are themselves members of religious communities or represent people who are starting to wonder why the Minister of Justice and the Prime Minister are trying to remove protections to express religious belief from the criminal code, opening faith leaders, individual people of faith, to criminal prosecution if their religious beliefs do not conform to the Liberal governments. We need to be able to do real work as legislators. The Justice Committee must be able to do real work on Bill C-9. And if the Liberals could stop obstructing their own agenda and stand by or reject this amendment, but do it publicly and clearly, and they can do it right now. Any member there can get up in questions and comments and say, you know what? We've listened to Canadians. We are backing away from this, and I invite them to do it at this very second, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's important, especially today, given the kind of day that we just had. We just had the Minister of Gender Equality, our colleague from the opposite, the Conservative colleague, and the Bloc Québécois and the NDP and the Greens speak about the importance of the Polytechnic attack that happened on women, and the member opposite called it effeminazi hawks, Madam Speaker. Can the member apologize in this House for saying that?
Order. The Honourable Member for Elgin, St. Thomas, London South.
Madam Speaker, when I was young, I said a great many things that I regret, and I have paid the price for, and I have apologized for. I was proud to stand in this House yesterday and support my colleague from Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola's bill to put strict penalties for people who are victims of intimate partner violence. But when the Liberals engage in this cancel culture game, they're proving why they cannot be trusted to hold the authority to put people away for what they say.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Lady Smith. L'Honourable Député.
Hi, everyone. MP Garnet Jettis here, just cutting in quickly. We're doing a live stream from the House of Commons. I'm right outside the House of Commons. I wanted to update you quickly on what is going on. So you've probably heard about the Liberal attack on religious freedom. They're proposing changes to Bill C-9 that would allow someone reading their religious scriptures to be considered hate speech, removing the religious exemption on hate speech. And so this is a serious problem, and we've seen in the last few days incredible mobilization from people across different faith communities, being present on the Hill, attending briefing sessions, calling their local members of Parliament. And if you haven't been part of those efforts, please get involved in doing that. Liberals are attacking religious freedom. It's not the first time they've attacked religious freedom, of course. We've seen a real decline in freedom of religion as a result of decisions and statements made by the Liberal government. But the changes they're proposing in C-9 are a critical red line and a real furtherance of this agenda, continuing getting worse under the Mark Carney Liberal government. So in order to shed light on this issue, Conservatives have moved a motion in Parliament calling for further consultations on C-9. What it's called is it's a travel motion, authorizing the committee to undertake more hearings and to meet with Canadians across the country. But this is an opportunity for us to shed light on what the Liberals are doing with C-9, particularly because the Liberals actually canceled the Justice Committee today. So there's supposed to be discussion at the Justice Committee about C-9. Liberals have canceled that. So my colleague Andrew Lawton from London, doing incredible work leading our Conservative team on this issue. He has just gotten up about 10 minutes ago, moved a motion speaking about this important issue. So he's speaking. Now there's a period of questions and comments that follows every speech. And so he's just getting some follow-up questions from different members. Right after him, you'll get to hear from Larry Brock, our Conservative Justice Shadow Minister. So Larry will be speaking, and then you'll be able to hear from members of Parliament and other parties as well as additional Conservative members of Parliament. So if you can share this live stream, we need to get the word out on Bill C-9, and do please contact your member of Parliament about this issue. We'll also share a link to the petition in the comments, so please take note of that. A link to the petition for this in the comments. That will be another important way for you to take action by clicking on that petition. So we'll cut back to the House of Commons now. Share this stream, please. It's a critically important issue. Liberals attacking religious freedom. Conservatives are moving this motion in Parliament to shed a light on that and fight back, and to call for further consultations by the committee. So we'll cut away now, and you can listen to the closing part of Andrew Lawton's responses to other questions, and then we'll go to Larry Brock's speech. Please sign that petition while you're watching.
On religious. The point that I will make is that politics has no place governing. Legislators have no place governing what is said at the pulpit, whether we're talking about Christians, Jews, Muslims, or anyone else. So my goodness, we need to stand up for all people of faith. It is not for us in this chamber to legislate or govern or regulate what Canadians with deeply held religious convictions say. And again, it's certainly not the government's purview to define hate in a way that tramples down on liberties of Canadians.
Resuming debate, to the honourable member for Brantford, Brantford, North, Six Nations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Always a pleasure to rise on behalf of the good people of Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations. And I too share many of the concerns of my colleague who just spoke. We have seen firsthand, in my respectful opinion, a masterclass of liberal hypocrisy on full display yesterday during question period, when the member who is a sitting Liberal member of committee from Duvel, Lachine, LaSalle, essentially said as follows: Mr. Speaker, after weeks of Conservative delays, the Justice Committee finally resumed its work on the Combating Hate Act, and we will continue that work on Thursday, meaning today. Will the Conservatives make sure bail reform is passed before Christmas? Could the minister speak to the importance of keeping this work moving so Canadians can have these important justice reforms take place? Clearly, a question posed by the Secretary of State, who responded in turn by saying, Mr. Speaker, Canadians have been clear that they want stronger protections in the face of rising hate, and they want meaningful bail reform. After weeks of Conservative delay tactics and stalling in committees, I am really happy to see that they might move forward on the combating hate crime legislation on Thursday. So, to much my surprise and the surprise of all of my colleagues, I get to the office this morning at 8:30, look at my P9 inbox, and there is a message from the clerk of the Justice Committee announcing that today's important meeting was canceled by the Liberal chair, probably as a result of the absolute split in that Liberal caucus as to how to properly deal with this particular religious exemption defense. At no time, Madam Speaker, did this Liberal government ever project any intention of removing that religious exemption. So behind closed doors over the past weekend, they approached the Bloc Québécois member, who has been steadfast in his position that that particular exemption needed to be removed. They worked out a deal that they would support that particular amendment, largely if the Bloc Québécois would continue to support the eventual passage of Bill C-9. Very, very dangerous, hypocrisy at its finest. We have experienced, as the former member, my colleague, has indicated, Madam Speaker, we've had abrupt cancellations of meetings. We've had abrupt endings of meetings. We've allocated resources to go to midnight this past Tuesday, abruptly ended at 5:30 as a result of religious leaders who are following this. not only locally, following this right across Canada, I too am receiving a lot of feedback of expressed concerns about what this Liberal government is prepared to do, and they abruptly adjourned. So I would only surmise that there is a lot of internal conflict between the Justice Committee and the direction from the PMO on this particular issue. So at the heart of the Bloc Québécois amendment, this is something that they tried to pass through a couple of years ago, did not make it past first reading. They referred to an incident of a radical imam from Quebec in October of 2023, who gave a speech at a pro-Palestinian rally where he said, quote, "Allah, take care of these Zionist aggressors. Allah, take care of the enemies of the people of Gaza. Allah, identify them all, then exterminate them. And don't spare any of them." What they are relying upon. And of course, and I will explain further in my speech, ultimately, the prosecution service in the province of Quebec declined to proceed. Now, today in the National Post, I read a very interesting article from Christine Van Gen, one of the top constitutional lawyers in this country, part of the Canadian Constitution Foundation. And the title of the article, Madam Speaker, "Changes to Bill C-9 aren't combating hate, they're criminalizing faith." She says, to secure Bloc Québécois support for its censorious Bill C-9, the Liberals have reportedly agreed to a troubling trade, removing the long-standing religious defense from Canada's hate speech laws. This would be a mistake. Throughout the Justice Committee's hearings, Bloc MPs fixated on this defense. Their central example, repeated to nearly every witness, was that Iman example I referred to. These comments were rightly condemned. They are grotesque. Complaints about them were investigated, and RCMP prepared a report. It was reviewed by 3 Crown prosecutors who concluded that no charges were warranted. As Quebec's Director of Criminal and Penal Prosecutions put it, the evidence does not establish beyond a reasonable doubt that the words spoken constitute incitement to hatred against an identifiable group under Section 319 of the Criminal Code. She says, one may argue that Zionist was just code for Jews. One may also believe that praying for death is morally abhorrent, but the decision not to charge Chikari turned on the basic threshold of incitement to hatred, not on the religious defense under Section 319. That's a very important distinction that the Bloc never repeats, that the Liberal government has never cited. There was no indication for the prosecution service that the religious defense was an impediment to prosecute or was even considered. Logically speaking, Madam Speaker, it is also true that anyone who thinks Chikari was not charged because of the religious defense must also believe that his speech was given in good faith and therefore was reasonable and delivered without malicious intent. She says further, even if it had involved the defense, one inflammatory prayer at a political rally is not a justification for dismantling a safeguard that protects millions of Canadians from state intrusion into matters of faith. That's what this Liberal government continues to do and has done not only in this particular parliament, but in the 44th. The religious defense has also been essential to the constitutionality of the hate speech prohibition itself. In the Supreme Court decision in Keegstra, they wrote that the offense is a minimal impairment on the right of freedom of expression, in part because of the presence of the Section 319 sub 3 defenses. The courts upheld the law because the religious exemption exists. Remove it, and the constitutional floor collapses. But even beyond constitutional risk, removing the defense is a profound moral and civil liberties mistake. We should not want, let alone empower, prosecutors to criminalize any form of prayer. Religious texts across traditions contain pleas for justice against enemies, metaphors for divine retribution, and expressions of anguish, symbolism, and cosmic struggle. This is not the realm of the police. If the state begins parsing palms line by line in a courtroom, then we have forgotten why the charter exists at all. Hear, hear. And I see my time is fastly coming to an end. All the more reason for everyone in this House to support our motion to ensure that every major stakeholder who wishes to express an opinion to defend the religious expression that we have in this charter needs to be heard. If the Liberals won't do it on their own, we are asking collectively this House to do that. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député de Lac.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to reassure my Conservative colleagues the Bloc isn't a mission against people who have faith or people who preach. The Bloc Québécois is I'll ask the Honourable Member to wait just a couple of seconds so the Honourable Member can put in his earpiece. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean from the beginning, please. Yes, I'd just like to reassure my colleagues the Bloc Québécois isn't on a mission to against people who have faith or people who represent various religions. Not at all. The Bloc Québécois wants to have an article removed from the criminal code which allows for calls of hatred or violence under an exemption. And in terms of the Charkaoui situation, I know the Conservative colleagues stand up often to defend the Jewish community, and the Jewish community in Quebec was very hurt by what happened with Mr. Charkaoui, and there was no that he was not brought before justice. So the Jewish community in Quebec supports the Bloc Québécois in its effort, and there is a wide consensus in Quebec to support the Bloc Québécois' mission to take this provision out of the criminal code. Is my colleague against the National Assembly of Quebec, which has unanimously supported the Bloc Québécois' position on this issue.
Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations.
The member clearly did not listen to my speech. The issue is not the religious exemption itself. It is the legal threshold that prosecutors must take a look at when presented with a case. Is there a reasonable prospect of a conviction? Is it in the public interest? As I indicated, the words of that radical Islam were disgusting, absolutely abhorrent, but it did not meet the threshold of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It had absolutely nothing to do with Section 319. That was the heart of my speech, Madam Speaker. And this member needs to realize if he has a lawyer that's within the caucus, perhaps that lawyer can do a little bit of research for this member, that for several decades, that particular defense has been seldomly used without any success whatsoever because of the existence of current criminal provisions that deal with incitement to hatred.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Peace River, Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member colleague for that speech. It was a great speech. I know I'm part of the Christian community, and with many Christians across Canada are concerned about, we've talked about the threats that it really poses to, the very Bible itself. Do Christians, do they need to be concerned about this legislation? Does it really threaten the Bible and free speech in Canada?
The Honourable Member for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations.
They should be very afraid. Every faith leader should be very afraid as to what this Liberal government, with the support of the Bloc Québécois, wishes to do. As I indicated, religious freedom is under attack at the hands of this Liberal government. So absolutely, they need to speak out loud and clear. Those members of the religious organizations across this country in Liberal-held ridings, in bloc ridings, need to reach out to their members to express very, very clearly they do not support this attack on religious freedom.
The comments, the Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, so thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm disappointed in the Conservative Party, in particular, a member who has been involved in the judicial system to plant fear in the minds of Canadians. And that's all the Conservative Party of Canada is doing today, Madam Speaker. It's shameful. The member knows full well that this is not an infringement on the freedom of religion. And if he had an ounce of integrity, he would indicate very clearly that the pastors, preachers, imams have nothing to fear.
I have a point of order from the Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Parks and
The
Sask.
comments made were clearly unparliamentary. I don't think I need to explain why.
There was a question. It wasn't an accusation. The Honourable Member would perhaps wish to reword his question.
Madam Speaker, I can appreciate they're a little sensitive to the truth. At the end of the day, Madam Speaker, this has no infringement on the freedoms of religion. And the member knows that. Why won't he say it?
The Honourable Member for Brentford, Brent South, Six Nations.
That particular member just spews hatred, spews disgust. He impugns the integrity of every one of my Conservative colleagues. And I am so disgusted in that particular framing of the question and the content of that question. I'm not even going to respond, Madam Speaker, because it's just not worthy of it.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. There's a couple of issues that I'd like to be able to bring to the attention of the House and for the individuals that would actually be following this debate. People should be concerned, Madam Speaker, really concerned in two different ways. First is the subject matter itself. And if I had the amount of time to just go through some of the things that have been provided to me, Madam Speaker, and I usually don't like to go to things that are provided in a written format, and I might end up doing that, and just to provide some assurances to people that are following the debate in regards to the subject matter itself. Then I have another area of concern, and that is the way in which the Conservative Party of Canada continues to be that destructive force on the floor of the House of Commons, Madam Speaker, because it does a great disservice to Canadians. And I think that Canadians in particular should be aware of that. But first, very briefly, I'll deal with the subject matter in a very short and concise way. Back in the 70s, Canada adopted the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. To the best of my knowledge, all members of the House support that particular charter.
Right.
It was Pierre Elliott Trudeau that brought it in, and I remember actually witnessing in my own home the signing of that particular document. It is one of the reasons why I had taken an interest in politics. I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that Canadians are very proud of the Charter of Rights. It is something in which I believe has been a leader throughout the world in terms of what Canada is all about in terms of our fundamental principles, such as democracy, such as rule of law. And the Charter of Rights provides a high level of comfort on a wide variety of issues. I'd like to quote the Charter of Rights, Madam Speaker. I'm going to need my glasses for this because the font's rather small, but it is a very important. And any Canadian can acquire a copy of the Charter of Rights, Madam Speaker. Fundamental freedoms. Number 2, everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. A, freedom of conscience, and religion. Even the Conservative member applauds it. Justifiably so, Madam Speaker. You see, the Charter of Rights trumps all the legislation that we might want to pass.
You'd think Garnet would know that.
That's why we often say, is the legislation charter proof? Have you actually done your homework and found out if it's charter compliant? Otherwise, you'll get the Supreme Court of Canada that'll say that you messed up and you need to make a change. Now, the Harper regime was really good at that, Madam Speaker. They passed criminal laws that constantly were in contradiction of the Charter of Rights. And as a direct result, the Supreme Court of Canada dictated that we needed to make changes.
Why even have a parliament in this case?
Even look at some of the private members' legislation that is there. So my first recommendation for those individuals that are concerned about the propaganda, the misinformation that floods out of the Conservative caucus, take a look at the Charter of Rights. And any legislation that passes has to be in compliance with the Charter of Rights. And the member, the critic, is very much aware of that, Mr. Speaker. They try to give this false impression. The impression that they're trying to give is that if you're a pastor, a priest, an imam, and you say something that's in the Bible or in the Quran, that you're going to go to jail. No, that's not what it says to the member opposite. It goes to show that they're drinking too much of that blue Kool-Aid, Madam Speaker. You really need to get an understanding of the law.
Can I interrupt the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary? We had a speech just before, and people were listening, and now I would ask the honourable members to listen to the Parliamentary Secretary until it's time for questions and comments. Order! The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I can appreciate that members are really sensitive on this. After all, they just heard a speech of garbage prior. All sorts of misinformation, Madam Speaker. And I would suggest to you.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. The prosecutor's getting a little aggressive, Madam Speaker.
Are getting very excited about this. Can we be respectful of one another? I heard. Can we be respectful of one another and stop calling each other names? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I can appreciate.
I have a point of order for the Honourable Member for the Honourable Member for oops, I'm sorry, the Oxford. Yes.
Madam Speaker, we sit in this House and listen to a lot of times pure nonsense come from this member on a regular basis, but we never called it garbage. We respected the member's right to speak his mind, even though he says a lot of words, but doesn't say much. But for him to go out and to say that the member's speech was garbage is absolutely nonsense, unparliamentary. Every member...
I understand what the honourable member is trying to say, and it will be seen as a point of order because it caused disruption, and that's the rule. Is the honourable Chief Government Whip responding to the same point of order?
The shadow critic for justice, I neglect to remember his riding name, yelled across the way to the member speaking that he was garbage. Well, you said that you heard it. At the very least, that member needs to stand up, apologize, and retract that.
Well, that would go, again, I'm going to use the expression that I think fits the situation, a pot and kettle. If one starts calling something garbage, well, they will get an answer of garbage. So can we be respectful of one another and stop using those terms, because it will cause disruption and the speeches will never be done properly. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, can I start from the top? Let's be a little courteous across the way. You know, at the end of the day, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, you know,
try it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, let me as I say, I started off by saying there's two concerns. The first concern was in regards to what type of information that the Conservative Party of Canada is using. No doubt, I haven't verified it yet, but no doubt it'll appear on social media, because they're trying to give a false impression based on fear to those that are faithful to the religions that they believe in and the leadership of those. And that I find is very disturbing, Madam Speaker, because it is definitely misleading, Madam Speaker. And there is no doubt about that. And that is the primary concern I have about the content of the legislation. Now let's talk about the motivation of the legislation, Madam Speaker. Why is the Conservative Party choosing to do this on the floor of the House of Commons? They have options, Madam Speaker, but they choose to use this as their motivation in order to prevent government legislation from passing. We were supposed to be debating, Madam Speaker, budget implementation legislation today. And what do we hear from the Conservatives? A bunch of crying, wah, 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 to quote the member opposite. Well, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, he might not care, but I can tell you every Canadian in every region of the country cares because that is there to support Canadians. It is a part of a plan that the Prime Minister has presented to Canada to build a country that is stronger, that is healthier, that works towards making Canada the strongest country in the G7, Madam Speaker. That's what the budget implementation is all about. And if you factor in the many efforts of the Prime Minister and the government in terms of pursuing trade opportunities that can even go beyond the Canada-USA border, you'll find that they complement each other. And we have a responsibility, all of us have a responsibility in the House to cooperate, to actually serve our constituents first and foremost. And time again, I witness far too often the Conservative Party more interested in serving the Conservative Party of Canada as opposed to Canadians. And we see that in their behavior, Madam Speaker. Let me give you an example, a tangible example dealing with Bill C-9. We have a committee that is supposed to be dealing with Bill C-9, Madam Speaker. And we've gone through hours and hours and hours of filibuster coming from the other side. Well, you know what, Madam Speaker? We can't deal with Bill C-14 until Bill C-9 is done. What is Bill 14? That is the bail reform legislation. The Prime Minister made a commitment to Canadians to bring forward bail reform legislation. We have provinces, we have law enforcement officers, we have other stakeholders, Canadians as a whole. They want bail reform legislation. And the biggest roadblock, the only roadblock in Canada today to prevent that from happening is the Conservative Party of Canada, Madam Speaker. And I say shame on each and every one of those members that continue to filibuster to prevent Canadians from having substantial changes to our bail reform legislation. They should be ashamed of themselves because that was an election platform, and we see time and time again Conservative member after Conservative member preventing the passage of important legislation, whether it's at the committee stage or it's on the floor of the House of Commons, Madam Speaker. These are the this is the type of thing that we see from the Conservative Party far, far too often. And that's the motivation for today, Madam Speaker. They don't want to debate the budget legislation again. It's not like it's the first time that they've brought in concurrence reports, Madam Speaker. You know, they cry when they say, oh, we want more time. We want more debate on legislation. You know, the other day I stood up and I said, well, I'll tell you what, Canadians work overtime. Canadians work past 6 o'clock in the evening. I asked, would you be prepared to sit till midnight? Oh, geez, no, we don't do that. Conservatives don't like to work hard, Madam Speaker. They like to talk and complain and the next word was a little unparliamentary, I won't say it. But Madam Speaker, I can tell you, at the end of the day, they don't like working for Canadians. Because if they did, well, member says, come on. Well, I'll challenge any member that's there, stand up and tell me you're prepared to work till midnight for the next 2 weeks in order that we can have more debate inside the floor of the House of Commons, Madam Speaker. Well, okay, Madam Speaker, I would ask ask for unanimous consent to allow the House to sit till midnight for the...
Hi, everyone. Want to cut into the live stream here real quick. You can only take so much of Kevin Lamoureux. That's how I feel anyway. So if you're just joining us, I am live streaming a special debate that we've launched in the House of Commons. Liberals are attacking religious freedom through Bill C-9, amendments that they're proposing through the secret deal they negotiated with the Bloc, but was recently revealed in the media, that they're launching this attack on religious freedom by allowing religious scriptures to be considered hate speech. So we've put forward this motion to force a conversation on this in the House of Commons. And I wanted to encourage you to sign the petition we've shared, to share this video. I've got a special guest here with me, Arpan Khanna. Arpan he's going to update us a bit on some of the things that the Liberals are claiming regarding bail legislation, but also on his work as the National Outreach Coordinator for the Conservative Party. Part of his role is to talk to Canadians from different backgrounds and hear what they're saying on different issues, bring their voices to Parliament. So Arpan, thanks for joining us quickly here.
Thank you, Garnett.
Let's start with this. What are you hearing on this issue?
Look, right across our country, from all faiths, from all backgrounds, Canadians are upset with this backroom deal the Liberals trying to sign with the Bloc. It's an attack on our religious freedom. We should be jailing repeat violent offenders, not punishing preachers who are trying to spread the word of God. And that's what we're seeing right now with the Liberals. They're trying to, they're going off the hinge, as you see in the clip or the cutout. They're losing their mind in Parliament. They've been canceling committee hearings. This morning was supposed to be a Justice Committee meeting. They canceled that. They're hiding from their record. And it's uniting Canadians across all faiths. We've been getting calls from Muslim leaders, Hindu, Sikh, obviously Christian, Jewish, who are saying that it's an attack on their religious freedom. Our country is built on those foundations. John Diefenbaker said it very, very clearly that to be Canadian, you are a free Canadian to speak your mind without fear. You could worship God in your own way. You could oppose what you believe is wrong. You could stand for what is right. That is what makes you Canadian. And the Liberal government is attacking those very fundamental beliefs that we all hold. And so we're pushing back extremely hard, as you see. But what this does is it takes away time from the legislation on bail. And as you know, we've been working extremely hard to put repeat violent offenders behind bars. Every day that goes by, 1,600 violent crimes happen in our community. So we should be locking them up instead of fighting back on liberal censorship laws and attacks on religious freedoms. We're going to keep the battle going, and our team is ready to fight this right to the end.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation of what you're hearing. Let's talk a bit about the bail issues, because there's some procedural parliamentary mechanics that the Liberals are appealing to incorrectly. I think it's good for people to kind of have a bit of a sense of how this works. So a committee can, generally speaking, would only deal with one issue at a time. A committee has sort of finite time. Now they might go back and forth between a couple different studies, but they're just the reality of limited by a certain amount of time. So you have two bills that are government bills going to the Justice Committee. One is this C-9, which includes attacks on free speech, as well as these attacks now on religious freedom. And there's also a bail change bill that reverses some previous Liberal decisions on bail. Now, Arpan, you've put forward a bill on bail that is way stronger, and we've been pushing this for much longer. But the Liberal bill reversing some of their previous changes, not as good as your bill, but we've been supportive of moving forward on taking steps that we can. But the Liberals are claiming that they have to deal with C-9 before we can deal with the bail bill. Not true at all. They could shelve Bill C-9 and focus instead on, I think, what Canadians would rather we be focused on, which is the issues that they've created in the bail system. So if you can talk a bit about why do you think the Liberals are making this clearly false claim that somehow Bill C-9 needs to be dealt with before the bail issue?
Look, it's all political for them. For Liberals, they're not prioritizing protecting Canadians, they're prioritizing their political futures, and that's why they're hiding from their own record, and that's why they're trying to hide from committee. C-14, obviously it's not a perfect bill. We obviously believe our bill is a stronger bill, like you said, but we want to see this in committee so we can make changes and amendments to make it stronger and tougher, to give the police the tools they need, to give the prosecutors the tool they need, and to keep Canadians safe. I think it's an important thing for us to do. But what they're doing is that they're just delaying and obstructing. And the funny, ironic part is that they're saying that we're blocking. We're not blocking at all. We're ready to get to work.
Yeah.
They're blocking their own bills. So how can you champion for bail when you're not even showing up to committee and being a part of the process? So It's just mind blowing to see, Garnett, what's going on. You know, this party has been the party of soft on crime, catch and release. You know, they brought in Bill C-75, Bill C-5, and now they're claiming to be firefighters when they're the ones that are the arsonist. That has to stop, and now they're wasting valuable time in Parliament when they should have been at committee this morning, working to keep Canadians safe.
Yeah, exactly. They should be focused on fixing the problems they created in the bail system rather than on jailing people who are reading scripture. As you noted, they scheduled C-9 at committee today, and then they canceled the committee entirely. They could have had the committee sit, but instead had to deal with the bail issue. So these are Liberal games. And
I think promises, Garnet. Yeah. Empty promises. We've seen this story before. Empty promises, more photo ops, no results for Canadians, and we're paying the price.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll get back to the House of Commons. You can hear the tail end if you can get through it. Maybe now's a good time to stand up and grab a snack. Or if you want to hear the last part of Kevin's speech, this will be followed by 10 minutes of questions and comments in the House of Commons, where Conservatives can get up and challenge the ridiculous things he said. And then after that, we'll hear from the Bloc. The Bloc really has been leading the charge against religious freedom. But now they've got the Liberals to side with them, and that's where we're seeing this problem. But anyways, as soon as Kevin finishes, we'll be able to grill him on the outrageous things he said. So stay tuned for that. Please sign the petitions and share the stream, and we'll keep this going as the debate continues. Right. Thanks everyone for getting involved.
Let's go.
What? Well, Madam Speaker, why not allow the bill to actually pass to committee? If it goes to committee, Madam Speaker, it can be broken down and several committees can go into it in great detail. But they won't. Why, Madam Speaker? Well, it's not in the Conservative Party's best interest. It might be in the interest of Canadians or the Parliament as a whole, but it's not in the best interest of the Conservative Party. So as a direct result, Madam Speaker, they're not going to deal with it. They've made the determination that we want to prevent the legislation from passing. And I can already imagine it today when we see the wind up as the winter session comes to an end. And my recommendation is that we come back for Christmas. I'm okay to do that, Madam Speaker. My colleagues might feel a little uneasy about it, but you know what? I'll put the interests of Canadians ahead of my personal interests and the interests of the Parliament. And if that means that we need to put in extra days, Madam Speaker, I believe that we should do that. Just like I believe that if you really and truly wanted more debate and you're concerned about debate time, I'm prepared to advocate that we sit longer hours, more days. You won't get any opposition from me on that, Madam Speaker. And I can tell you, at the end of the day, chances are I'll probably be around than most others to listen to that debate and to participate in that debate, Madam Speaker. So I look to my Conservative friends on the opposite side, and I appeal to them to look at the substantive legislation that we have today that has been filibustered and work with the government, as the government will work with the opposition, so that we can, in fact, have substantive legislative changes, such as the bail reform legislation. Please, that would be one of them for me personally. But for Canadians, I think it would be just an awesome thing to see happen. And if we do that, Madam Speaker, we could actually do it before Christmas. But everyone here knows that it can only happen if the Conservative Party was to participate fully in it. Now, in the spirit of being a parliamentarian that has a deep amount of respect for the process, I would apologize to the member opposite that I said his speech was garbage. I respect all speeches that are delivered inside the House, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Brantford, Brent South, Six Nations.
Madam Speaker, the election end of April, we returned to Parliament at the end of May. We had approximately 5 to 6 weeks of sitting. We then broke for the summer. So approximately 5 months passes, almost 6 months passes after the election. The very first piece of criminal justice legislation brought by the Attorney General is Bill C-9. Prioritizing Bill C-9. We had our debate. We got it into committee. You heard in my speech, delay after delay, canceled meetings, ending abruptly, all done by the Liberal chair, who is now a minister. So I listened to this particular member talk about obstruction and delays. He is a master of hypocrisy. So the question is, we are prepared. We were prepared to sit to midnight this past Tuesday. We were prepared to sit to midnight today to get to the heart of Bill C-9. Why did your government cancel the meeting abruptly?
Speaking through me, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, first of all, Madam Speaker, I appreciate the work that standing committees do. And I recognize that as a government, we are a minority. So if the Bloc and the Conservatives choose to take certain actions, at times that could cause some issues where the government might need to see some sort of an adjournment. So I think there's the practicality of what takes place in a committee. I wasn't sitting at that committee. I spent a lot of time inside the chamber. And that is the reason why I made the suggestion that we can, from my perspective, sit till midnight. And that's why I had asked for unanimous consent, Madam Speaker. I don't have a problem doing that. I'll even go beyond that if it makes the member happy enough. I knew that we could actually get some legislation passed. I think it would be a wonderful thing for Canada, for all Canadians.
I remember for La Matapédia. The Bloc has been calling for the criminal code to stop protecting hate speech hidden behind a cover of religion. Religion should never justify hate. Once again, we see that Quebec within Canada is being held back or stagnating. We've seen it with conversion therapy, with medical assistance in dying, with secularism. These are things that are long-standing values in Quebec, and the rest of the country doesn't understand and is standing in the way of these things. Quebec deserves to live according to its own values. Madam Speaker, there's only one solution for that, and that is Quebec independence.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. One of the things I love about Canada and living in a federalist country is that all areas have a high sense of uniqueness and distinct character to them. I cherish, for example, the province of Quebec for the French language. Its in-depth culture and arts programming that they have there. And in many ways, they do lead the country in different areas. Between Quebec and Manitoba, we share a lot in common. We both have hydro development. We both have a healthy aerospace industry. And Manitoba has a growing French Francophone community. And I think it's one of the reasons why I would suggest to you that Canada is the best country in the world to call home. It's because we appreciate the differences and the contributions that all communities have to make our country the great country it is.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Chief Government Whip.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member for his intervention today because it was extremely revealing. It revealed a lot about the Conservatives, especially in the way that they acted in the House during this speech, what they were doing when he was talking versus the way that they acted when it came to actually voting on the words that they had just used moments before. But I think what underpins all of this, Madam Speaker, and the member brought it up in his speech, is exactly how Conservatives approach their role in this House. They believe that their role here is to obstruct at every possible opportunity, when in reality, in a Westminster parliamentary system, the role of the opposition is to challenge the government to do better and to be better, not to systematically, at every single opportunity, try to dismantle every piece of legislation and policy that the government puts forward, because they could never imagine allowing the government to actually have a win on something. Would the member could please expand on his thoughts on how he brought this up earlier about what the genuine role is of the opposition and how this Reform Party across the way has completely lost their way?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I don't know if Preston Manning would have liked the member calling them a Reform Party. They're probably a little further to the right than the Reform ever was, Madam Speaker, in many ways. Having said that, I can tell you, you know, it was interesting. And maybe put it in this way. we seen coming out of the election, I thought maybe there might be a chance to see a different type of Conservative Party, especially when the leader of the Conservative Party lost his seat in Carleton. Because remember, we'll recall, when the leader wasn't here, when the leader's office was in fact not as strong as it is today out of the Conservative Party, we actually passed Bill C-5. And that was a cooperative. We could not have done it without the support of the Conservative Party. And I am grateful for that, because that helped us build a one Canadian economy. It helped us build the national priority projects, Madam Speaker. We're talking billions of dollars of investment because of that legislation. And prior to the leader of the Conservative Party winning the by-election in August, I think it was, there seemed to be more cooperation. But it seems that we've gone back to where we were a year ago. And the Conservative right has once again dominated the party.
The Honourable Member for Mission Musqueam, Abbotsford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The reason we're here this morning is that the Justice Committee is asking for the opportunity to hear from Canadians and travel. A travel motion before the House of Commons is in fact very rare. And at the heart of why we need this travel motion is Section 319 of the Criminal Code. And I'd like to ask the member from Winnipeg North if he could clarify in good faith the position of the government that they do in fact want to remove Section 319, Clause 3, which states in good faith the person expressed or attempted to establish by an argument an opinion on a religious subject or an opinion based on a religious belief in a religious text from the Criminal Code. Madam Speaker, as a person of faith, I never thought I would have to have this argument in this chamber, in this country, and it is hard to stand here today. But this is why I'm here. They challenge us why we're here. I'm here to stand up for people of all faith in my nation to have the freedom of expression under the Charter of Rights. So will the member clarify, do they want to remove that section from the Criminal Code?
The Honourable Secretary.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I know we're not supposed to use props. So I'm going to put my prop of the Canada Charter of Rights down. And I would say to the member that there is every member of the Liberal caucus, from the Prime Minister to every member that supports the Charter of Rights. I would highly recommend that the member read the Charter of Rights, where it guarantees the rights of freedom, the freedom of religion. That includes, I would suggest to you, Madam Speaker, when I think of a pastor or a priest or an imam, I think of what it is that they say to their congregation. And there is no reason for people to be fearful. The only fear factor that's out there is the Conservative Party that is trying to turn it into a wedge issue. And if there is anything like their crime file, the reason why they're doing it is for fundraising purposes alone.
The
Honourable Member for Drummond. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't know what Kool-Aid the Conservatives are drinking, what religious Kool-Aid that makes them think that freedom of religious expression and freedom of religion are going to be affected by this. It's incredible. My question for the member for Winnipeg North is, he seems to support this repeal of the defense under Section 319. Previously, the Liberals didn't support us on this. In 2024, I remember that the minister of the time, Mr. Varani, proposed including that in Bill 63 so that we would support it. So he was already open to the idea. And now we're being made the same offer to withdraw this religious exception in C-9. But the Liberals suddenly at committee flip-flopped a little bit, and they don't want the committee to sit and move forward on this. So I'd really like to know from the colleague from Winnipeg North, are they serious this time? Are we really going to go ahead with this? And if so, why can't the committee meet to finally put an end to this religious exception, which is really shameful?
Very brief answer from the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I think the best thing I can do is just reinforce the Charter of Rights, Madam Speaker. That is something in which I believe in. That's something in which every Liberal member of Parliament believes in.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'll be sharing my time with the member for Drummond. That said, Madam Speaker, I too have a bit of a hard time following my Liberal colleague from Winnipeg North, who says there's been a deal between the Bloc and the Conservatives not to sit. Just a minute. I was there yesterday. I was willing to sit till midnight. I'd be willing to sit till midnight tonight. What we called for, and I personally did this to the minister and to his representative on the committee, we want C-9 passed before Christmas. It's no more complicated than that. So when he says the Bloc's getting in the way, just a minute. Now, what is the Liberals' position, as my colleague for Drummond said? We don't really know how to take this. I need an indication. Are the Liberals actually afraid of religious lobbyists? Is that why they're backing down? Is that why they're refusing to take out of the criminal code a provision that allows a person to promote or incite hatred as long as it's under the banner of religion? That makes no sense whatsoever. And if that's truly their position, they should say so clearly. I don't think that is their position. That's not what the Justice Minister told me. That's not what Liberals are telling me when I discuss this with them. But I do note that this isn't the first time this has happened, that the Liberals have backtracked. It's been happening for years. Now, the Conservatives have moved a motion to allow the committee to try to hear witnesses. Now, in terms of democracy, hearing witnesses is a good thing. Letting people say what they think about proposed legislation is a good thing. But it's not just the travel. That's not the only way of getting one's views across. For the committee to travel, that's one thing. But we've already heard from some 30-odd witnesses at the Justice Committee. They've given their evidence. They've expressed their viewpoints on this C-9. We've heard, we received some 40 briefs. So we've heard the viewpoints of certain groups and individuals and experts on C-9. I think the job's been done. I think obviously we could hear from more people. We could hear people ad infinitum, but sooner or later you have to take action. You can't just sit down and listen to witnesses forever and ever and ever and never do anything about it. Our work here in the House is to be parliamentarians. We are lawmakers. We're supposed to enact legislation. The government is proposing C-9. I didn't agree with C-9 at first, and I told the minister we proposed amendments. The minister disagreed. We discussed it, and eventually we came to an agreement on certain things. And we hope that that work will come to fruition by Christmas. But no, the Conservatives are saying, no, let's start all over again. Let's rehear witnesses. Let's just drag this out endlessly. I don't agree. I find it disappointing. There are some Conservatives I have a lot of respect for, and I'm convinced that they want the work to move forward, but they're not all of a like mind. There are pressures coming from religious groups. That's true. My assistant just half an hour ago got over 100 calls at my riding office from individuals and organizations saying vote against C-9. And I'm not the only one. I'm sure that other members have experienced the same thing. There's been a flood of calls and pressure. And it's never fun to come under that kind of pressure. But if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, as they say. Our job is to make laws, to make decisions. People have differing points of view. They will put pressure on us, but that's to be expected. You have to deal with it. You have to put up with it, and you have to hunker down and do your job. We are here to represent people who expect us to do something. And so traveling around Canada, I'm all for it. I'm going to do that next summer when I'm on holiday. But for now, we've done enough work on this. This is an important bill, and I think we should vote on it. I think it deserves to be voted on as soon as possible. Once again, the only reason, the only explanation for this is the religious pressure that people are feeling. And as we heard before from our esteemed colleague, the conservative colleague, does this mean that you really want to do away with this religious exception in the criminal code? Yes, that's exactly what we want to do. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to quote from the Bible or the Quran or whatever it is. No, on the contrary, you'll be able to continue reading and quoting from whatever religious text you want. That's freedom of religion, and we agree with that. Section 319 does not say that people are free to read the Quran or the Bible or in any other religious document. What it says is that you're not allowed to promote hatred. That is the whole point of 319. And the subsection that we would like to repeal says that it's okay if it's under the cover of religion. And we're saying, no, that's not if your religion says you need to hate and you need to promote hatred or incite hatred, well, then I'm sorry. I have a lot of respect for individuals, but that won't fly in Canada. We don't agree with that. You might have to change your religion or practice it elsewhere if it calls for promoting or inciting hatred. You do not have the right in Quebec or in Canada to promote hatred, to incite hatred, regardless of whether it's based on a religious text or a philosophical text or whatever, what have you. It's not allowed, and it should remain so. This is an anachronism in our legal system. The idea that promoting hatred could be justified on any basis. That said, I'm still allowed to read the Bible or the Quran. I'm still allowed to believe whatever I like and to be inspired by these religious writings. And there are some great principles in those documents, some wise, some wisdom, and there are good things that should inspire people in the Bible and the Quran and so on, things that should help us live together in society. But we mustn't forget that the context, some of those writings are thousands of years old. And I'm sorry, it doesn't apply anymore. I'm sorry, stoning an adulterous woman, I just can't subscribe to that anymore. It makes no sense to me anymore. Or a father who's willing to sacrifice their son for their God. Well, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be willing to do that for any reason. And the religious wars of the past, those were brave soldiers defending their philosophies and their religious points of view. And it made sense at the time. But today, I hope that we will never, neither myself, nor my children, nor my grandchildren will ever have to experience religious warfare again. So it's all part of history. But calling for peace and love, that's all great. But if you read a text that's 3,000 years old and you say, this is what religion should look like, and today, and if it's quoted not because of the broad principles of peace and living together, harmony and so on, if it's to say that religious wars are a good thing, let's start them all over again. Well, no, that's not okay. We don't agree with that. It doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be there in the criminal code. We want this removed from our legislation. And I insist, and Quebecers, some 60 or more % of Quebecers want this taken out of the criminal code, and over half the population of Canada wants this removed from the criminal code too. So I confirm what was said before. We did have an agreement. The Bloc did have an agreement with Liberals, including the Justice Minister, to repeal that provision from the criminal code. And I hope we'll be able to do it this time. I hope we can do it before Christmas so that we can all go home for the holidays, so that we can shake hands in peace and love and in the conviction that we'll be able to continue to live together peacefully in Quebec and in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Questions and comments?
De la ministre de l'Industrie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. And I certainly agree with many of the elements in his speech. I'd like to hear his comments, if possible, on the subject of the second part of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the part concerning fundamental freedoms. How does the Bloc understand those fundamental rights and freedoms? The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for his question. I would say that the Bloc Québécois understands those provisions as anyone would reading them, and the courts frequently interpret those provisions. Those are important provisions, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and we all, agree with that. But, freedom of expression, all those freedoms have limits, Mr. Speaker. Without that, it would just be, a cacophony. I'm free to say what I think, but if I say to someone things that are illegal, like, for example, you should kill your wife because I learned that she slept with the neighbor, well, that's an incitation to violence. It doesn't have any place in a society that is peaceful. So we agree with everything. We have the same thing in Quebec, and, I understand that there are provisions in the Charter of Quebec about rights and freedoms, and we agree with that. But they have to be interpreted in a reasonable way according to the context. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for York Centre.
Thank you. I hear my friend, and I want to say I'm enjoying working with this Bloc member on committee, and I'd like to understand, does he have any knowledge as to what is actually happening at the Justice Committee? He just referred to the Bloc having an agreement in the past tense. Meeting was canceled last Tuesday. Meeting is canceled tonight. Again, we have major pieces of legislation between us, but it appears as if the Liberals don't want us to convene. And also, I'd like to follow up and ask my friend, he appears to suggest that the rationale for the amendment is specifically a case of Adil Charkoui in Montreal, who called for the exterminations of the enemies of Allah. And the Bloc seems to suggest that it's on the basis of this exception that charges were not instituted. But the prosecutorial services in Quebec said that that's not the case. It's because it was not an identifiable group of people against whom he's incited.
Order. No. I need to give time a response to the Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What Mr. Charkoui said last year is a good example, and no, I don't have proved that he was not charged because of the criminal code, obviously, but this kind of provision or subsection, well, it's something that would encourage prosecutors to be prudent. If I'm a prosecutor, I need to listen to the lawyers who are working on the file, and I read the charges. And if I see there's an easy defense for the individual that we want to charge, well, the code says that you have the right to do that if you're basing your words on a religious text. Well, am I going to go all the way to the Supreme Court to fight something where there's a clear and obvious defense? No, that's the problem with the religious exemption. Charges won't be laid when they should be.
Comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, we don't agree with the Bloc on this issue. But I would like to ask a question on the Liberal Party's position and the discussions between the Bloc and the Liberals. It was in the media on Monday, and it was confirmed by a Liberal spokesperson that there was an agreement between the government and the Bloc. An agreement to move forward with this measure, which in our opinion goes against religious freedom. Can the Bloc confirm that that was the position of the government? Because it's strange, today the government doesn't have the privilege to say what its position is or to report that. Can the Bloc confirm that the government had agreed to this agreement on this issue? The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord in 45 seconds. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for his question. I confirm that that is indeed the case. We had an agreement for these provisions with the changes in the amendment, and I am also unhappy with the lack of courage where the meeting yesterday was cancelled, and I would invite our colleague, the Minister of Justice, and our colleagues on the committee to call the committee back so that as soon as next week, we can work on these provisions and pass C-9. Thank you.
Resuming debate. Reprise du débat. L'honorable député de Drummond.
The honourable member for Drummond. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to start by congratulating my colleague from Liverpool for the brilliant speech that he's just made, and also for the very rigorous work that he's done on this file, and the work that he's been doing so well for many years now. It's not just this year or last week that the Bloc Québécois has been working on this issue and asked for the religious exemption, Section 319 of the Criminal Code, to be repealed. My colleague earlier was talking about the support for this measure proposed by the Bloc Québécois, and that support in Quebec is, according to a Léger poll from last year, at 75%. 75% of Quebecers support removing it. In the rest of Canada, there's also strong support. My colleague from Liverpool talked about at least 55%. It's actually 66% of Canadians who support removing this provision. 66% of Canadians, Mr. Speaker, that's the 66% of Canadians who understand what this measure means, who aren't being misled by populist rhetoric, which would make them fear for religious freedom. And that's what I find really unfortunate. And, why? Well, because, as a politician, as a member of this House, we have the responsibility to tell our constituents the truth, to not make them believe certain things so they'll align with our own political position, or even worse, with a position that lobby groups, pressure groups are putting on our party. It's a responsibility that I take very seriously, Mr. Speaker, and that's why when people like, many have done this morning, have called my riding to ask us to vote against this bill, C-9, because of the presumed impact that this will have on their freedom of religion, well, I asked my team to ask these people for examples, not just to say, thank you for calling, we'll take that under advisement, we'll take note of that, but I said, ask these people to give an example, a case of where in the practice of their religion or their faith, or in the practice of the work done by their pastor, their priest, their imam, or their religious leader, whether that be in a mosque or church or a synagogue, give an example of something that might require the protection of this religious exemption under Section 319 of the Criminal Code. Nobody, Mr. Speaker, nobody has been able to give an answer to that. Why? Well, because the answers that would be logical are so horrible. They're so egregious that the people who are calling us in good faith, who are scared of the rhetoric coming from the Conservatives, well, those people, they think that we're telling them that their priest can't read the Bible anymore, that their imam can't quote the Quran anymore, or parts of the Quran, because of this provision. And, no, that's nonsense. Whatever the reasons why the RCMP and the prosecution service decided not to charge Mr. Charkaoui, I'll repeat the words that Mr. Charkaoui said, and these are the reason that there's been a debate on this and discussions in Quebec and now here in the House of Commons. Adil Charkaoui, at a pro-Palestinian, pro-Gaza rally, declared...
Hi, folks. Cutting back into the live stream for a moment here. I know you're watching the debate in the House of Commons on C-9, on this Liberal attack on religious freedom. But I've got Larry Brock, our great justice critic and vice chair of the Justice Committee, just with me to cut in for a couple minutes. And we're both of us are just outside the House of Commons where this debate is taking place. Quick reminder to you to sign the petition in the comments and also share this stream. We've got a massive response from the public so far on this issue, which is great, but we've got to keep it going. Larry, how's the debate going so far on C-9?
Well, the running theme, particularly from all Liberal members who've spoken so far in all interventions, is accusing the Conservative team, this oozes hypocrisy, accusing us of deliberately and purposely delaying the passage of Bill C-9. Right now, we are at the clause-by-clause consideration. We've only gone through one particular clause, Garnet. That was last week. Tuesday was abruptly concluded right at 5:30, although we had resources to go to midnight. We were prepared to go to midnight tonight to deal with the substantive areas, but particularly clause number 4, which seeks to remove the religious exemption, which is the attack on religious freedom in this country. We as conservatives will always fight tooth and nail to preserve and protect our religious rights and all religious leaders in this particular country. So they are accusing us of stalling. Yet this morning, when I was preparing for this marathon committee meeting of some 9+ hours, I abruptly get an email from the chair of the Justice Committee confirming that the Liberals abruptly canceled the meeting. You can't have it both ways, folks. This is nuts. This is crazy. It's hypocrisy at the finest. But know one thing. Garnet, myself, and the rest of our conservative colleagues will always put Canadians first, will always stand for religious protections.
Thanks, Larry. And I know you have to go, but let me just throw in one more quick question, which is the Liberals flip-flopped within 24 hours, canceling this meeting. It seems pretty clear that they're hearing the feedback from the public. Do you agree with that, that likely the Liberals trying to hide on this issue? First, they were full speed ahead on this. Yeah. Now they're ducking a bit. That suggests they're feeling the public response.
No question. They're feeling the heat. They're completely being wedged on this. Part of the caucus wants to proceed with it. Part of the caucus does not want to proceed with it. There's internal conflict in that party, internal conflict between members on the Justice Committee and the direction from the PMO's office. It's an absolute mess.
Okay, Larry, thanks for your great work on this. We're going to continue fighting for religious freedom, as you said, and we'll put folks back on the live stream.
Thank you.
We will offer to take out the religious exemption for your support of Bill 63, but it didn't work because there were some major concerns that we had when it came to freedom of expression, freedom of religion with C-63. So we weren't able to come to that agreement. Mr. Speaker, at the Heritage Committee, these days we're studying the impact of influencers and social media on kids and teenagers. And we realized yesterday with a visit from 2 eminent professors from UNESCO who've studied radicalization, we realized yesterday that part of the bill C-63 had been passed, we would already have made a good step forward in protecting vulnerable people. And that leads me to say that sometimes for political reasons, legislation is delayed. Good laws are delayed. Laws that are necessary, which are urgent. And the longer they're delayed, the longer vulnerable people find themselves in difficult situations. We leave those people in danger, particularly in this case, children, teenagers, and other vulnerable populations. But all that to say, Mr. Speaker, and to conclude in just a couple of minutes, the discussion that we're having today, I find it disappointing. I would have hoped that we could have gone above partisanship or pressure from religious groups. I would have hoped that we could have remained rooted in fact and debated the proposal of the Bloc Québécois for what it is. It's maybe something where we could debate, around individual convictions, but let's stop misleading people. Let's make sure that people have the right facts so we can have a frank and open discussion. I haven't myself been in a church for a very long time. I confess, if you'll forgive the pun, that I haven't been in a church in a long time. I haven't heard a sermon in a long time. But when I was a teenager, I did attend Mass, and I don't remember a single sermon where there was a priest calling for violence based on the words of the Bible. Never could I imagine any faith leader use hate speech or call to violence in a religious speech. So I'd be curious to know the pastors that the conservatives in the places of religion that the conservatives go to. What are they saying in those places? Because if the conservatives are so afraid that taking this provision out of the criminal code is going to endanger their pastors, their faith leaders, for words, for example, against homosexuality, as one of the conservatives mentioned earlier, what are they saying about homosexuals if they're afraid of being taken to court? Are they calling for their heads to be cut off? What is it? I don't understand. What words are they trying to defend by opposing this change to the criminal code? So I'll remind you, Mr. Speaker, of something that's very important. 75% of Quebecers are in favor of this change, and 66% of Canadians. That's a pretty good consensus for there to at least be an honest conversation on this question. Thank you.
Now, Secretary of State, Sport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for committing to this important question and with respect to this, and I'd like to thank him for his work at committee as well. But today, Mr. Speaker, what is the Bloc's position on the improved security for social media and online platforms to protect children? And what measures does the party feel that the federal government should take to better protect minors online? What activities aside from promotion would be correct? The honourable member for Drummond. I spoke with this during my speak, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. That wasn't the objective of my speech overall, but I would like to reserve my comments and my answer when we'll have completed the study we're doing right now, because after every meeting, we are learning exceptionally interesting things from this committee, and when this study will appear, perhaps we could discuss the conclusions that we will draw from this study. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sarnia and Lambton-Bouquet-Junon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a great deal of respect for the member, but does he understand that it's already illegal to say something that incites violence? That's already illegal. So this amendment is not necessary, and this amendment will violate the rights and freedoms of 26 million Canadians. Does he understand that? The honourable member for Drummond. I understand that my colleague is not reading this right, but I'll take another approach now. If hate speech and spreading hate is banned under this article, there are religious exceptions, but if these religious exceptions are necessary, then let's just remove them. If they're not used as a defense or successfully used as defense, we just remove these articles, these clauses. Does my colleague, if your colleague already thinks that the safeguards are sufficient, why does she object to the removal of these two provisions of Article 139 that leads to this exemption for hate speech for religious regions? Questions and comments? The member for Lac Saint Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we're having a strange debate because the Liberals don't want to debate this at committee, and the Conservatives are against this provision, even though there was agreement, as my colleague said from Rivière-du-Nord said in his speech earlier. But my question is rather simple for my colleague from Drummond, who I thank for his excellent speech. He said in Quebec, 75% of people are in favor of the Bloc's proposal, but not only this, there was unanimous request from the National Assembly in this respect. So all parties combined asked for support for the Bloc's proposal. And my question for my colleague is, does he know a lot of colleagues from the Conservatives from certain party from Quebec that do not think this to be a logical proposal? The honourable member for Drummond. When you ask the question to the Conservative caucus from Quebec, we don't get an answer today. I'm looking forward to listening to a speech from a Quebec Conservative colleague so I could understand what their positions are, what arguments they'll defend. That's an excellent question from my colleague from Lac Saint Jean.
Secretary of State, Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak forcefully against the motion.
Or questions and comments. And the member for Winnipeg North with a very brief question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm wondering if the member can just provide his assurance when he talked about telling the truth. I think it is important that we tell the truth because misleading information causes a great deal of fear. And if he can just provide his thoughts on that issue.
The honourable member for Drummond, 30 seconds. Mr. Speaker, I spoke about it in great detail in my speech. I deplore that we're twisting the facts to have our positions accepted, people who are concerned. But we have a duty to be honest and to speak responsibly to our constituents and say things as they are. In this case, I feel like they are spreading a message of fear so that people who practice religion feel threatened. And this is absolutely false. And I agree with the responsibility we have to hold debates in respecting truth and facts. Thank you. Resuming debate.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Secretary of State for Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak very forcefully against motion 219 brought forward by the member for Elgin St. Thomas London South, which seeks to instruct the Justice Committee to drop its work on the Combating Hate Act, Bill C-9, and instead launch a taxpayer-funded cross-country tour as a means of delaying the committee's work. Let's be clear from the start, Mr. Speaker, that this motion is not about hearing from Canadians. This motion is about delaying justice. It is about freezing the Combating Hate Act. And after weeks of Conservative obstruction, after hours of procedural games, after filibusters, after points of order and challenges to the chair, when clause by clause of the Combating Hate Act finally began, Conservatives panicked and pulled the emergency brake on this study and its work. This motion is that emergency brake. Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve to know exactly what has been happening at the Justice Committee. For weeks, the members opposites have used every trick in the procedural playbook to stall this bill. Points of order, challenges to the chair, attempts to reopen settled motions, efforts to drag the committee backward every time it tried to move forward, wasting time to block participation by witnesses who wanted to testify to this bill. And when the very first committee meeting on this bill was scheduled, when Canadians expected serious debate, the member for Elgin St. Thomas London South shamelessly filibustered for hours, talking for 2 hours about dogs and cats. Not hate crimes, not anti-Semitism, not attacks on LGBTQ Canadians, not threats against women. Mr. Speaker, while Canadians are being targeted by hate, Conservatives are entertaining themselves and gumming up the work of this committee and stalling the progress of this bill. They should be ashamed of themselves. Now that this procedural stalling has finally failed, Conservatives are trying a new tactic. They want Parliament to authorize a nationwide tour with flights, hotels, staff entourages, with no timeline to return to the bill, and full authority to shut down the clause-by-clause analysis. Mr. Speaker, let's call this what it is. It is not consultation. It is not accountability. This is instead a taxpayer-funded Conservative roadshow that is designed to kill the bill through delay. Canadians have asked us for protection from hate and intimidation. Conservatives have answered with a travel itinerary and an invoice. Mr. Speaker, when I think about the reasons behind C-9, combating hate, and why this was one of the first bills that this government brought forward in this parliamentary session, it is because of the imperative of addressing hate in Canada. I've heard from members across my community about the importance of this issue, about how hate is on the rise, how we've seen 5,000 hate crimes reported in 2024, almost double the number from 2018. And those numbers are probably underreported in terms of the number of Canadians that are actually facing hate crimes in this country. Why are these crimes going underreported? Because Canadians believe that the criminal justice system is not currently equipped to deal with the type of hate crimes that we are seeing growing in this country. That is what this bill seeks to address, Mr. Speaker. That is what the committee should be working on, ensuring that we get this bill back into Parliament to pass us to increase public safety for Canadians. Hate is not an issue that is felt by a single community. Jewish Canadians, Muslim Canadians, the LGBTQ community, women, many other communities have all been subject to this rising tide of hate and bigotry. But particularly over the last 2 years, the Jewish community has felt this acutely and disproportionately, especially in Toronto, St. Paul's, and other major cities. Religiously motivated hate crimes are the most reported category of hate crime in Toronto. And of those, 81 last year, 81%. Taking action against this rise in hate was a central promise that I made to the people of Toronto St. Paul's in the recent election. And I firmly believe that this legislation that we are debating, that we should be debating and moving forward, will be a critical first step in that direction. So where does that lead us, Mr. Speaker? We are overdue for a conversation in this country about the legitimate boundaries of free expression. We've seen protests turn more violent and hateful in recent years. We've seen this in Sikh and Hindu temples. We've seen it on the streets, with people protesting on Israel and Palestine. We've seen it during COVID with the trucker protests and protests outside hospitals and vaccine clinics. We are grappling with an explosion of hate online that is moving offline onto our streets and into our communities. Our right to free expression as Canadians is never, nor should it be, ever, a shield against accountability. Canadian law has long distinguished between protected speech and willful harm. It was under the leadership of our 14th Prime Minister, Lester Pearson, my favorite, that the government of the day struck a special committee to review hate propaganda in Canada. That committee, which included a little-known associate professor of law from the University of Montreal, subsequently our 15th Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau, set out in its unanimous report a passage that our Supreme Court has cited, and I paraphrase here. The study of hate is a study in the powers of words to maim, and what is a civilized society can do about it. Every society from time to time draws lines at the point where the intolerable and the impermissible coincide. In a free society such as our own, where the privilege of speech can induce ideas that may change the very order itself, there is a bias weighted heavily in favor of the maximum of rhetoric, whatever the cost and consequences. But that bias stops this side of injury to the community itself and to individual members or identifiable groups innocently caught in verbal crossfire that goes beyond legitimate debate. Mr. Speaker, when harm is done and injury occurs or violence ensues, we have an obligation to act on behalf of all citizens. The bill in front of the House and in front of the Standing Committee on Justice today is a blueprint for action. We have heard from communities, from law enforcement, from Crowns, that first we need clarity in our law surrounding hate and speed with how it is enforced. To this end, our bill on combating hate proposes to create new offenses, which will target exactly the sort of expression which is meant to terrorize a community, rather than express policy or political disagreements, which are healthy in a democracy. The obstruction offense would specifically go after behavior that harasses users of community spaces belonging to identifiable groups. Blocking access to places where communities gather, schools, houses of worship, community centers, is not a form of free expression. It is bullying with the intent of terrifying a community into agreeing with your views. Mr. Speaker, as I heard in a roundtable with community leaders that I hosted in my riding, hate is not limited to the steps outside a local school or synagogue. It can happen anywhere, as we learned in the hate-motivated stabbing of a Jewish woman in a grocery store right here in Ottawa. The intimidation offense in this bill would criminalize conduct that is done with the intent to intimidate. Speech in a vacuum is often innocuous, but recently we've seen groups of protesters, masked, yelling violent insults and hate at members of a targeted community. This is not free expression in a civil society. This is intimidation, pure and simple. Our laws are intended to prevent this. It must be stopped. Police must be empowered to intervene and make arrests before this hateful rhetoric turns into violence. Thirdly, this bill creates a new hate crime offense, one that can be applied against every offense in the criminal code or any other federal law. It would serve to explicitly denounce all criminal conduct motivated by hate. And fourth, a new hate propaganda offense will prohibit the display of certain symbols associated with the Nazi Party, such as the Hakenkreuz and Nazi SS bowls, as well as any symbols associated with a listed terrorist group, such as the flags of Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Proud Boys. Importantly, this is an offense against the spreading of hate. It is not criminalizing symbols in an academic setting such as a textbook. Our laws are sophisticated. They can distinguish these things. For many communities, these symbols are deeply traumatic, and the public display of them is not only offensive, but dehumanizing and terrorizing. If you are a listed terrorist entity in this country, listed by this government, listed by this parliament, then this parliament should prohibit the spreading of hate through the display of those symbols. The public display of these symbols is often done with the explicit intent of scaring people, of spreading hate more often than not, leading to violence. Criminalizing the willful public use of these symbols should be a consensus opinion in this House. Mr. Speaker, when we introduced the Combating Hate Act alongside the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act, we did it to respond directly to what communities across Canada are demanding. They are demanding stronger protections against hate. They are demanding stronger consequences for intimidation. They are demanding stronger tools for law enforcement. And from day one, the Minister of Justice has said clearly that we remain open to constructive improvements on this bill in good faith. But what we will not accept, Mr. Speaker, is bad faith sabotage and delay dressed up as consultation, which is what we are getting from that side of the House. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are not asking for a roadshow. They are asking for results. They are demanding results. They are demanding that we do not delay and that we pass this bill with expediency. Speaker, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, CIJA, wrote publicly to the Conservative leader urging him to work with this government to pass Bill C-9 in a spirit of collaboration. Police services, municipal leaders, religious communities, human rights organizations, they all want this bill passed now. So let's be honest about what is really going on here. It is clear that the leader of the opposition has a divided caucus on this bill. It is clear that he does not want this to go to a vote before his leadership review next month. So I ask directly to the members opposite, why are they more interested in saving the leader of the opposition's job than saving the lives of Canadians who are being targeted by hate and intimidation? Why will they not move this bill forward? And now, Mr. Speaker, we're hearing even something more reckless from the opposition. They are calling the Combating Hate Bill a censorship bill. So let me ask plainly, do the members opposite think that it is okay to see synagogues firebombed? Do the members opposite think that it is okay to threaten and target LGBTQ people because of who they love? And do the members opposite think that it is okay to wave a terrorist flag in public and call for the extermination of women and racialized Canadians? Of course not. So that is why we need to be getting behind this bill. That is the type of egregious, hateful conduct that this bill targets. So when the opposition screams about censorship, the real question is, which form of hate are they trying to protect? Mr. Speaker, only Conservatives would call this bill censorship, while all of the following groups stand behind it: the Edmonton Police Service, B'nai B'rith Canada, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Canadian Hindu Alliance, Canadians from coast to coast to coast. And it is no surprise that this latest outrage comes from the same political wing that has previously minimized real-world violence and spread reckless rhetoric. So, Mr. Speaker, every single delay to this bill right now, including this motion for instruction before the House today, is a delay that belongs to this Conservative Party. They talked for 2 hours about cats and dogs instead of starting the clause-by-clause review of this bill. They challenged the chair. They tried repeatedly to pull the committee off the bill. And when clause-by-clause finally started, they dropped this motion to try to shut it down. This motion has one purpose and one purpose only: to push the Combating Hate Act into the deep freeze. Not to improve it, not to strengthen it, not to protect Canadians, not to address the rising tide of hate and anti-Semitism that we see in this country, but just to stop it cold in its tracks and put it off so that they don't have to face the division in their cause. They don't have to take a vote on it. They don't have to stand up behind this bill, but get behind a bill that organizations and communities across this country support. Mr. Speaker, we will not allow that. We will not stand behind that. Canadians want protection from hate. Conservatives want excuses to stall. Canadians want laws that keep them safe. Conservative want trip across the country with flights, hotels, and theatrics that they'll manufacture. We will defeat this motion because of this stunt, and we will do everything in our power to pass the Combating Hate Act despite this stunt. It's noise on that side of the House, Mr. Speaker. It cannot distract us from the important issues that have plagued this country, and an important step forward on combating hate in this country that is overdue, that is a proud part of our Canadian history and of the lawful boundaries on freedom of expression when it crosses into a territory that is intimidating and fearful for Canadians in their streets, in their neighborhoods, and that is the scourge of hate. Let's put an end to this, Mr. Speaker. Let's vote down this motion, and I encourage the members opposite to put their money where their mouth is, to get behind their principles and support a bill that combats hate in Canada.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The member for Provencher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to that member for her speech, the parliamentary secretary. You know, many faith leaders and individuals in my community have reached out to me with concerns about C-9, the infringement on freedom of speech, and in particular the amendment that was brought forward, which would remove the religious exemption and would potentially target pastors while reading passages out of the Bible. And to quote the chair of that committee, who has been since promoted to Minister of Canadian Identity, passages like Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Romans would be considered hateful. And I'm wondering, does that member agree with the past committee chair's representation of those passages?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of State Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I think that with many issues like this, it behooves the members opposite to stand up and to read the actual criminal code and to read what is the definition of hate. Because their approach to these issues is to fearmonger and to shed light on situations that are unlikely to see the light of day in an actual court of law, Mr. Speaker. Hate is defined right now, communicating statements in a public place that incite hatred against any identifiable group where such an incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace. We also have criminal code provisions preventing the willful promotion of hatred, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is give clarity to the definition of hate, but we should not in this country stand up and permit hate. Those who spread hate need to be accountable for it, and law enforcement needs the tool to police it.
Questions et commentaires.
No member for Rimouski. Mr. Speaker, it's quite clear today that the religious lobbies are influencing the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. The Conservatives are spreading misinformation to stir up their base, their religious base, and the Liberals are backing away from repealing this religious-based defense in the criminal code. Now, the Quebec National Assembly has been clear and unanimous on this. This provision in the criminal code that allows hate speech under the color of religion, this loophole needs to be closed, sealed off. Can the Liberals say today clearly why they're abandoning Quebecers at a time when hate is increasing in public spaces. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I said in my remarks, the Minister of Justice is open to considering good faith amendments to this bill. The government doesn't hold a monopoly on great legislation, but let's move that legislation forward. Let's have those debates in good faith. Let's talk critically about the state of the law and what it actually is, not what the Conservatives want people to believe online, what the law is. Let's look at actually what the Supreme Court has said about hate and how that is intended to actually protect freedoms in our democracy. When we recognize the scourge of hate, we allow people to live freer lives because they are free of hate and fear and intimidation. That is the purpose of hate laws that we have had in this country for decades.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I really and truly appreciate the comments from the Parliamentary Secretary. And, you know, the unfortunate reality is because of the Conservative Party of Canada's behavior on this legislation, it's affecting two pieces of legislation. It deals with hate crimes, Mr. Speaker, and Canadians are not going to be able to see the hate crime legislation before the end of the year. It also deals, the same committee, with the bail reform legislation, something in which the Prime Minister made an election commitment on part of our election platform. Liberals want to see these legislations pass, this legislation, both of them, before the end of the year. So the victim here is Canadians and the safety of our communities. I'm wondering if she can reflect on how selfish the Conservative Party is being by not allowing Canadians to have this legislation passed.
Order. We'll have a little order here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for the question. It is selfish, and the Conservatives should be ashamed for their behaviors in stalling this bill. I have to tell you, I speak to constituents in my riding all the time, Mr. Speaker, who are affected by the hate on their streets and in their communities, who are scared about having children being dropped off at daycare, or their young students going to university, going on campus, going downtown in Toronto to work and having to walk through a protest. Mr. Speaker, this is more than words. This is actually violence. And our laws are intended to prevent and protect Canadians from experiencing that fear in their day-to-day lives, that fear and intimidation. That is what this Combating Hate Act seeks to address, and the Conservatives need to stand up and get behind this bill.
Questions and comments. Question commentator. The Honourable Member for Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
It's a short question. The member opposite listed a number of groups that supported C-9. Would that same list that she recited in her speech support the amendment that was just proposed?
And why did they cancel the committee?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I think that's an excellent question, and it would have been great if the Standing Committee on Justice had been able to hear more witnesses, but instead of the Conservatives filibustering, the witness list weren't actually able to appear in front of the committee because the Conservatives were too busy talking about their family pets and filibustering the work that needed to be done.
We have lots of time for questions. We can ask questions. We don't need to go back and forth. Question from Member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, the issue of religious freedom is actually inside the Charter of Rights, which guarantees religious freedoms. Yet we have members of the Conservative Party that are actually, I would suggest to you, providing misleading information that ultimately is causing a great deal of concern for those that practice a faith. Unfortunately, as a result, you might get people receiving misinformation and then bringing it to the attention when in fact the Conservatives know that they're doing this and it's causing fear in the minds of many. And if she could just provide her thoughts on that.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I am a proud Christian. I'm a proud Canadian. I believe in the tenets of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I believe in our freedom of expression deeply. But I'm also a lawyer, and I also understand that there is a boundary, that when speech crosses a high threshold into hate, into inciting fear, inciting violence, calling for the death or extermination of people, of our fellow citizens, then that is simply wrong. And there is nothing There is nothing that should keep people from being accountable for that type of interpretation, those type of hurtful statements. Everyone is a contributing part of this Canadian democracy, Mr. Speaker. We need to uphold it. That is what these laws seek to protect.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for York Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I represent one of the largest Jewish communities in the country, and I will not take any lessons from these liberals on safeguarding the Jewish community. And also, I am tired of the other side accusing the Conservatives of slowing this down. I would like to ask the member a very clear question. Last Tuesday, the Justice Committee was ready to sit to listen to bail or to listen to C-9, and the Liberals canceled the Justice Committee meeting last Tuesday. And then this morning, I wake up, I'm sipping on my cup of coffee, I'm getting ready for C-9 tonight, and I'm learning that Justice Committee tonight was canceled by the Liberal chair. And I'd like an answer, if they're so determined to move forward with this terrible piece of legislation. Why? Why did they cancel Justice Committee tonight? I'd like an answer, please.
The Honourable Parliament Secretary, the Secretary of State Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I would urge the Conservative bench to stand up and vote in favor of this bill, because I have yet to see evidence that they would support protecting this bill, protecting Canadians from hate and intimidation. In over 2 years since we've had in 2 years since October 7th, Mr. Speaker, I have yet to hear a Conservative stand up in favor of safe access zones, for example, in municipalities across this country. We know exactly where they stand. We have heard their debates on this bill in Parliament and at committee. Canadians should know that they are all talk when it comes to supporting communities, protecting them from hate. They will not put their votes behind supporting this legislation because they are divided as a caucus around the very measures that this bill seeks to protect around protecting Canadians from hate and legitimate, lawful boundaries on hate speech.
Time for a very brief question. The member from Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do want to pick up on the issue of the hate speech. And the hate speech is very real. The member made references to several examples of it. And unfortunately, as I pointed out, this legislation is not going to be able to pass because of Conservative obstruction.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if she could just provide, once again, her thoughts in regards to the sadness of the legislation not being.
The Honourable Parliament Secretary, a very brief response.
Mr. Speaker, I also have had the experience of working during COVID when there were protests outside of hospitals and vaccine clinics. As a government, we took the same steps. We protected doctors and nurses from doing their jobs. We protected Canadians from being able to go and get vaccines. The same things are happening in Canada today. We need to be protecting places of worship, community centers, and the places where communities gather, because the same fear and intimidation is
And the time has expired for questions and comments. Resuming debate. Please do that. The Honourable Member for Bowmanville, Oshawa North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand today on behalf of my constituents of Bowmanville, Oshawa North to oppose Bill C-9 and support efforts to further scrutinize and study this legislation. I share my time with the member from York Centre. Mr. Speaker, there are many problems with Bill C-9 and the Liberal attempt to amend Bill C-9 to criminalize the reading and sharing of Bible verses in this country. We oppose this for many reasons, but I do want to draw attention to an area that has not gotten enough attention, which is the efforts of the Liberal Party to enact a form of cultural imperialism on Christians, Muslims, and Jews in this country. I want to share with you, Mr. Speaker, an academic definition of cultural imperialism, because I am sure many in the House probably are not used to hearing that term to describe what the Liberal Party is attempting to do to citizens of our country. This definition comes from EBSCO, a research database published in 2024. And the definition reads, as I say, cultural imperialism refers to the imposition of one culture's values, beliefs, and practices over another, often leading to the erosion of the latter's unique cultural identity. It manifests through various mediums, including education, religion, and media, where dominant cultures often shape and redefine the social and ethical frameworks of less dominant societies. Cultural imperialism causes changes that are usually faster than would otherwise occur, and in a direction that benefits those from the dominant or influencing culture. The faster pace can mean that the changes have a destabilizing effect on other aspects of the culture, and the association of the changes with benefits accruing to members of the dominant culture. Taken together, that means that one party is benefiting from actions that are harmful to others. Now, Mr. Speaker, I share this definition to provide some context for what I believe the Liberal Party is doing right now. They've been in power for over a decade and tried their very best to exercise influence over every institution in this country. They've abused the power of the federal government to impose their values, beliefs, and practices on as many institutions in our country as they possibly can. And today, we see evidence that they, through Bill C-9 and the Liberal effort to amend Bill C-9, an effort to exercise that cultural imperialism over churches, mosques, and synagogues. I provided an academic definition for cultural imperialism, but I would also like to provide a pop culture reference. The hit song from last year, Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us, he uses some language to describe colonial thinking in his diss track to Drake. He says, and I quote, "You not a colleague, you a colonizer." And that, Mr. Speaker, is precisely what the Liberal Party is attempting to do to Christians, Muslims, and Jews in this country. Liberals are not treating the diverse communities of our country with any degree of respect. They are not treating them like colleagues to listen to them and work with them and respect their traditions and their faiths. Instead, they are behaving like colonizers, attempting to abuse state power to exercise undue influence by attempting to criminalize things that families in this country have believed in since the very founding of this nation by the English and the French. Now, they will, of course, as they have throughout this morning and this afternoon, made efforts to characterize our concerns over this legislation as theatrics. But I bring it back to what was said, the actual language used by the now Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, who was promoted, Mr. Speaker, by the Prime Minister after he made these comments. As chair of the Justice Committee on October 30th, he said that 3 books of the Bible, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Romans, are hateful. He used the language of hate to describe verses in the Bible that people have prayed over, they have read to their children, they have shared in communities all across this country for a very long time. And the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that the Liberal Party pretends, and I emphasize, Mr. Speaker, pretends to care about, enshrines the right to religious freedom precisely as a sign of respect for the fact that there are things the government should not have its fingerprints on. The government should not be making its way into churches, mosques, and synagogues in an effort to bring liberal values and use the criminal justice system to enforce liberal values on the private religious lives of Canadian citizens. But that is precisely what a colonizer would do. That is precisely what a cultural imperialist would do. It would look at churches, mosques, and synagogues and say, how can the federal government get their way in there? And it is wrong, it's unethical, and it is against the traditions of this country. It is an insult to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, one thing I have observed in the relatively short time that I have been a member of Parliament is that the Liberal Party does this, I don't know what you would call it, mind games, false presentation, making an effort to convince Christian, Muslims, and Jews of various cultural backgrounds that they respect them. They make this effort to show we want to hear you and welcome you into Canadian politics. I've seen them with my own eyes, Mr. Speaker, in the Toronto area, running around at cultural events, running around at cultural holidays, eating samosas and jerk chicken and pretending that they respect people from diverse community backgrounds. They run around and they offer people DEI and slogans like diversity is our strength. They say all kind of funny things, diversity, vote for me, you know, kind of attitude they bring around our communities. And then what do they do, Mr. Speaker, when they come to Ottawa? What they do is they want to culturally imperialize the people of this country and their children. They actually have no respect for diversity at all, And any Christian, Muslim, or Jew whose ancestors come from any part of the world must be able to unite in recognizing that the Liberal Party has no respect for our religions, our traditions, or our values. They believe that the federal government is superior to us, and they believe they have the right to impose their values on our churches, mosques, and synagogues. You know, I believe when we talk about the language of colonizers and culturally imperialists, we have to recognize that when they attack Scripture, when they attack the Bible, when they attack our religions, when they try to justify bringing the criminal justice system into our places of worship, what they are doing is trying to strip away the things that make us well-rounded people. To them, we are simply economic inputs. We should have no culture. They believe we should have no meaning in our lives. They offer us nihilism. They offer us the chance to be a column on a spreadsheet used to calculate GDP. That's all they think of us.
Or votes.
And the efforts that we make to be well-rounded people, to be part of a community, to believe in something, to have conviction, to be connected to the traditions of our fathers, our mothers, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, they ridicule and they insult. They call it hateful to believe that we come from something. But Mr. Speaker, we stand on the shoulders of giants who sacrificed for us to be here. They sacrificed for us to have the life that we have today. And we will not denounce the very people who make our lives possible. We will not denounce the cultures and traditions that they come from. And we will not sit here quietly and idly while the Liberal Party seeks to call our ancestors hateful. We will not accept that. We will reject their cultural imperialism. We will call them colonizers when they behave like colonizers. And in closing, I will suggest, Mr. Speaker, that one of the reasons they denigrate Canadian history, one of the reasons that they keep the Canadian flag at half-mast for a year, one of the reasons they support teaching our children in this country that our country should be ashamed of its own history is because they are embarrassed by what they see in the mirror. And they have not learned the lessons from history, and they repeat the mistakes made in history to colonize and imperialize over other people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
In comments, the Honourable Chief Government Whip.
Where does this member get off thinking that he knows the first thing about me, Mr. Speaker? How does he believe to know what church I was baptized in, what church I visit every Sunday morning, what church my wife and I got married in, what the faith is that my wife and I both practice? This member has no clue, yet he stands up in this house and decides to preach to us about who we are when he has absolutely no clue. Is it even possible in this member's mind, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps I do and I am deeply faithful to my own religion? I just don't see the need to show that in this House of Commons to everybody else.
The member for Bowmanville, Oshawa North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't pretend to know anything about the member from Kingston other than what he shows me when I show up to work. And what I see when I show up to work is a man with no respect for Christians, Muslims, and Jews in this country, and a man who supports efforts by the Liberal Party to colonize and imperialize people.
Order. I believe we have a point of order from the member from Winnipeg North.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, I know the member from Kingston is a Christian himself. And to make the type of allegation that the member just made, I believe he owes...
Order. I'll ask the member from Bowmanville or Oshawa North to please quiet down. The member from Winnipeg North, he could quickly get to the point of his...
Mr. Speaker, I know the government House Whip as a Christian. And it is distasteful for the member to say what he just put on the record, and we would ask that he withdraw the comments and apologize.
And resign.
Then you should leave the chamber.
Yeah.
Order. I can stand here all day. Order. I will stand here all day until the House comes back to order. Okay. I will review what was said on the tapes. I will come, take a look at the blues and come, and I will take a look at the come and come back to the House if necessary. Order! The honourable member for the Chief Government Whip on order. I will invite the member to please not take the floor when he hasn't been recognized by the chair. The honourable Chief Government Whip.
Notwithstanding what was said about me, because I will leave it to the member to do the respectful thing and apologize to me, but the member just yelled out to you that you are participating in liberal censorship, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. He owes an apology to this House and to you personally and to the seat that you occupy.
Yeah.
Here. Order. I didn't hear that comment, but I do appreciate, and I... Order.
The honourable member for Drummond, I believe, on the point of order. Mr. Speaker, we've talked a lot about decorum in this House. How many warnings, how many times do you have to yell order before you act? Because it's becoming embarrassing, this situation. Mr. Speaker, please do bring some order and apply your authority in this House. Thank you. I appreciate the comments from the honourable member.
We are on questions and comments. Question commentaire, and I'm hoping that we can get through these next 3.5 minutes without further interruptions and interjections. I'll just ask all members to please have some respect. This is a place of debate. This is a place where we should have vigorous debates. But when those comments go beyond the debate and go into the questioning of the motivations or the character of individual members, and that's where things go too far. So I'm going to ask members to have some respect for the offices that we hold on behalf of the Canadians who send us here from coast to coast to coast. Questions or comments? Question commentaire.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You'll allow me to say, Mr. Speaker, that the people from Quebec who are watching what's happening here right now find this surreal, because everybody is missing the point here, as we say. If we look at the Bloc Québécois proposal when it comes to the religious exemption, in the criminal code, you can't incite hate. And unfortunately, there's a little provision that says there's an exception, a religious exception, when sacred texts are being referred to. So all we're doing is removing that religious exemption. There's no attack against any religion here. And when my colleague says that this is imperialism and colonialism, this proposal, well, 75% of Quebecers who are in favor of this proposal, and there's a unanimous motion that was passed by the National Assembly of Quebec. The 125 MNAs who are in favor of this proposal. Is my colleague saying that 75% of Quebecers and 100% of the elected members of the National Assembly of Quebec are imperialist and colonialist, Mr. Speaker?
The member for Bowmanville, Oshawa North.
I want to thank my colleague for the question. Specifically, I talked about liberal colonizers and liberal imperialists. So just to clarify for the record. Now, for my colleague from Quebec, what I would say is the Bloc Québécois has represented their effort here in this chamber as pushing back on the encroachment of the federal government. In this situation, with Bill C-9 and this amendment, the Bloc Québécois is actually asking the federal government to have more power over the lives of Quebecers and more power over the lives of all Canadian citizens. I would think that would be an area where the Bloc Québécois and Conservatives would agree, no abuse of federal state power. Thank you.
Comments, the honourable member for Oxford.
Speaker, in the Bill of Rights, Prime Minister John Diefenbaker said, I'm free to speak without fear, free to worship God in my own way, free to stand for what I believe is right, and free to oppose what I believe is wrong. Those are the foundations our country is built on. The same values that this liberal government is attacking. They're attacking faiths from all across the spectrum: Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, Jews, Christians. Why is this government prioritizing the putting away pastors for preaching the Bible as opposed to putting away repeat violent offenders? The member travels quite a bit across the country, meeting with folks from all walks of life. What is he hearing from different faith leaders across our country?
Honourable member for Bowmanville, Oshawa North.
What is uniting faith leaders and faith communities across Canada is concern that we have a liberal federal government right now that doesn't understand boundaries over its own power. Instead of being humble enough to recognize that people who are sick or struggling in communities across our nation rely on churches, mosques, and synagogues as a source of support and strength, the Liberal government instead looks at these institutions and wonders how they can exercise more state power over every function of our lives and every function of our communities. It is wrong and it must be opposed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, please to debate. The Honourable member for York Centre.
You're here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What are these Liberals doing? What are they doing? To those of you at home who still don't understand what's happening vis-a-vis this bill, let me provide you with a quick summary, and it's going to be a professional summary. First thing they're doing, yeah, look at them laugh. That's fine. The first thing they're doing is they're lowering the threshold for the definition of hatred. The Supreme Court has articulated the test for hatred in a case called Kickstra 35 years ago. It was a good working definition. Now they lower the threshold to make it easier to convict of hate speech. 2, they eliminate the requirement prescribed in the criminal code for attorney general consent in order to commence a hate-related prosecutions. Of course, we've articulated a number of concerns with that. You can have private prosecutions that will be instituted by vexatious litigants, potentially putting free speech at risk, especially with a lower threshold. They further create this standalone offense, a standalone hate-motivated offense. And what's interesting about that offense is that it doesn't just pertain to solely criminal conduct, but specifically the language in the section provides that the standalone hatred offense can be predicated on any offense contrary to any federal statute. So you may have an offense under the Canada Labour Code. You may have an offense under the Canada Elections Act. And if a prosecutor, perhaps a politically motivated prosecutor, believes that it may have been motivated by hatred, then you could be subject to criminal prosecution for what is otherwise civil behavior. Now, they take credit for suggesting that the new intimidation and access to facilities offense changes anything. At Justice Committee, we had an unbiased professional witness, Mark Sandler, one of the most celebrated criminal defense attorneys in this country, was invited both by myself and the Liberals. And he said to them that the new access and intimidation offense doesn't do anything that is not already criminal under the criminal code. It is criminal to intimidate folks trying to enter their place of worship or their school. It is criminal to certainly behave in a threatening fashion. Behave in a threatening fashion. And I don't mind for their heckles. I welcome their heckles. They didn't have courage to show up at the Justice Committee today. They canceled committee to consider consideration of this bill, clause by clause, because they're afraid, because they know that the bill is going nowhere, and they know that it's a terrible bill. So we should be traveling across the country for Canadians all across, coast to coast to coast, to learn what a terrible piece of legislation this is.
Hear, hear.
What this legislation fails to do, almost every witness we've heard from at the Justice Committee said, you missed the point. What you should have done is you should have criminalized the willful promotion of terrorism. That's what we're seeing in Canada Street. During the previous Conservative government, we did have a law that criminalized the glorification of terrorism. But Justin Trudeau in 2017 and his minions, they repealed Bill C-51. And instead, what you have going on right now is folks in my riding dressing like Yahya Sinwar, the worst murderer of Jews since the Holocaust, and he's being glorified and celebrated. This is why I'm proud that just a few weeks ago, I brought my first private member's bill to criminalize the willful promotion of terrorism, terrorist activity, terrorist group, or any activity of a terrorist group, and I challenge the Liberals. If they actually want to do something about this, if they want to do something that's happening on Canada Street, something that's happening in my riding, being one of the most Jewish ridings in the country, pass my PMB, 257, criminalize the willful promotion of terrorism, terrorist activity, or terrorist group. I'd like to take a pause for a minute, Mr. Speaker, and speak a little bit from the heart. I'm joined here by my friend from Saskatchewan. I had a couple of friends over for refreshments at my home last week, And my friend asked me, Roman, can you talk to me what it was like in the USSR? I was born and lived in the Soviet Union until I was almost 9. And if I could capture it in one word, it would be fear. And as an 8-year-old, you have enough intellectual presence to understand when your family is afraid. I first realized that I was of the Jewish faith when I was 4 or 5. It was on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and I walked into my grandparents' bedroom. I was raised by my grandparents. And on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, I saw my grandpa read a Siddur, a Jewish prayer book. And this would have been in 1984, 1985. And even then, despite Gorbachev's glasnost and arguably perestroika, if a Soviet resident was found with a Jewish prayer book, they could potentially be looking at a labor camp for 3 to 5 years. And that was one of my first memories. I've asked Dad about it subsequently, and he said, it's unbelievable that Grandpa has this book. And so I cannot believe that I'm sitting in this house right now, and I'm hearing who is now the Heritage and Culture Minister essentially suggesting that reciting parts of the Bible could somehow be criminalized, almost like a strict liability offense. I can't fathom that. Back to the USSR, like the Beatles song. One of the worst things that this bill does, in addition to now supposedly looking to eliminate the religious defense, is to lower the threshold for what is hate speech. And I had considerable discussion with my friend about it the other week, is how we were taught that we ought to avoid certain topics. Certain topics were taboo. We were not allowed to discuss the West. We were not allowed to use the word America. We were not allowed to use the word Israel. We were not allowed to point out that there is no bread or jeans or eggs in the store, because the only religion allowed was communism. And when my friend from Oshawa Bowmanville talks about liberal colonialism, that's exactly what it is. It's liberal dictate in terms of freedom of thought. No other thought allowed other than liberal thought, and someone we should be shamed for it. Well, I'm proud of my conservative colleagues. Shame no more. We know that we're on the right side of this one, and so do the liberals. Which is why this morning, contrary to the suggestion that they want to move this bill forward, they canceled the Justice Committee. I'm prepared to show up tonight. All of us are prepared to show up at 3:30 in the afternoon and discuss clause by clause of this bill, but they locked us out. They locked us out. Now, why are they saying that they bring this religious exemption? This is very important. Supposedly, according to the bloc, it was because of a guy named Adil Charkawi, who on October 28th, 2024, in a speech in Montreal to protesters, speaking in Arabic, denounced Zionist aggressors and called on Allah to kill the enemies of the people of Gaza, to spare none of them. And the bloc is suggesting that it's because of the religious exemption that Adil Charkawi was not charged. Well, that is not true at all. First of all, we're talking about incitement to violence. If you read section 319 sub B sub 3, it only applies to the second section, which is willful promotion of hatred in 319. It does not apply to 319 sub 1. So I reject that argument just on legal grounds to begin with. Second of all, the section is very clear. In order to avail yourself of the defense, the religious speech has to be in good faith. In good faith. That means that you cannot be wishing for the extermination of peoples. And if you're wishing for the extermination of peoples, it's no longer in good faith, and the defense does not apply. And finally, as if we don't read the news, the Quebec Prosecutorial Service came out on this in May of 2025, and explained what transpired. The reason they did not proceed against Charkawi is not because of their religious defense, but because they said that he didn't call for violence against any identifiable group of people. Because the enemies of Allah, according to the Quebec prosecutors, was not a defined enough group by which you can leech onto the incitement to violence provision and charge. This is a farce. I don't know why we're here. We could be debating bail right now. We have Bill C-14, a very weak attempt to reform bail and sentencing that's presently before the Justice Committee. Last Tuesday, the Liberals locked us out and they accuse us of a filibuster. Tonight, the Liberals locked us out and they accuse us of somehow sabotaging this. Let's get together tonight. Let's reopen the committee and hear bail. Let's get some work done. Toronto turned into Gotham City. Yet these Liberals have no shame. And now reality caught up to them. Canadians across the country understand that this is a terrible bill. And I implore them, withdraw it. Let's go back to the drawing board. Don't do me any favors. I represent one of the largest Jewish constituencies in the country. This bill does nothing to protect them. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Question and commentaire. The Honourable Parliament Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, the amount of misinformation, misleading information that is pumped out through social media and emails by the Conservative Party is really does a disservice to all Canadians. The member asked about the committee. Now the Conservative Party wants to use tax dollars in order to tour the country to spread even more misinformation. It's truly amazing, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to dealing with hate messaging and the hate that's being experienced by many Canadians, they're obstructing the legislation. They want taxpayers to pay for a tour for more misinformation. Instead of exploiting Canadians, why don't they allow the legislation to pass?
The Honourable Member for York Centre.
This Liberal government has no regard for taxpayer money. $78 billion deficit is what this budget that just passed is proposing. So don't lecture me about taxpayer dollars. What these Liberals are now trying to do is shield this bill from clear sight by all Canadians who now understand that this is beyond Liberal platitudes. All right? This is not about hate. This is not about defending the Jewish community. There's ample examples of how we can defend the Jewish community. Set the right tone. Have the Attorney General write to the provincial Attorney Generals, write to the police forces and say, we have laws on the books. They're called incitement to violence. Enforce them. The misinformation is coming from that side of the aisle.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague. Unlike the Liberals, my colleague is clear and honest. Here's what he thinks while he debates it. At the Bloc, it's the same thing. I think we're being clear and honest with the proposals we've made to remove this exemption. But the Liberals don't want to work. They're ensuring we don't have committee meetings. I think there's some dissension in their caucus, so it's not very clear on the Liberal side. Well, I'd like to respond to what my colleague said. Well, Quebecers are listening to this debate right now, watching things, and they don't understand what you don't understand. We're not attacking any religion. I've met with the Jewish community. CJA are in favor of this Bloc's proposals. We just want to remove a religious exemption from the criminal code. It's just this. There's no religions being attacked here. So why does my colleague understand this?
I appreciate the question from my friend from the Bloc. The defense is, if in good faith the person expressed or attempted to establish by argument an opinion on a religious subject or an opinion based on a belief in a religious text. The section itself arises out of Charter Section 2. It is not an extension of it only. It is effectively part and parcel of it. And I have not seen a situation where this has been used to defend against the type of speech that our Bloc friends are concerned about. This simply hasn't happened. A deal called for the killing of people. It's incitement to violence. No one has ever suggested that he hid behind 319 sub 3 sub B. That just hasn't happened. And so...
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, for the better part of 2 years in that member's riding, there has been a lawless mob that has functioned with complete impunity through the streets, calling for the genocide of their own citizens. There has been gunshots into school and fire bombings into businesses. And instead of enforcement, we don't have a law problem in this country. We have an enforcement problem, and we have a government that stands from this pedestal to pour fuel on the fire of that enforcement problem. And I want to know from the member, rather than focusing on enforcement, why is it that he thinks this government is bringing in a bill that is going to be weaponized against the very community that it purports to protect?
The honourable member for York Centre, a brief response, about 30 seconds.
It's conformity of thought. It's like my friend from Oshawa Bowmanville said, it's either liberal think or no think. Like I said, in the Soviet Union, the only religion allowed was communism, which is why the holding of a religious text would have been punishable by labor camp. The Haya Mushka School for Girls in my riding has been shot at 3 times. Every Sunday at Shepherd and Bathurst, when we first came to Canada 30 years ago, we came to the intersection of Shepherd and Bathurst. And now at that very intersection, every Sunday, a group of mass thugs come and call for incite to violence against the Jews. We don't need this legislation. We need to enforce existing legislation, incitement to violence and assault.
Resuming debate. Please do that. The Honourable Chief Government Whip.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I rise today to participate in this debate that the Conservatives have tossed on the floor at the last minute in an attempt to obviously do what I've become witness to them doing for a better part of 10 years now, which is to obstruct and to prevent government business from occurring and to find and look for opportunities that they can participate in just preventing the government from doing anything. You know, the member before me said he was going to speak professionally about everything and talked about the politics of this. I'm just going to lay out for you, Mr. Speaker, what has occurred to this point so that the public can be the judge of whether or not they think that what is going on is suspicious or not. So Bill C-9, formally passed by this House at second reading, and it went to committee. It goes to committee. There were 3 meetings, over 8 hours of meetings with witnesses, where all political parties, government, opposition, the bloc, were able to ask questions. On November the 20th, I should back up a bit. What happens after that is the chair, typically we go into clause by clause. So this is an opportunity for members to start to look at the actual bill with the perspective of what they had learned through the deliberations with the witnesses for over 8 hours and 3 meetings worth. So what the chair of the committee said on November the 24th is he said, I would like everybody to submit their amendments to the bill. Everybody had until November 24th to submit their amendments. Now, the amendments, and by nature of the way that our committees work, are submitted in confidence and are kept in camera until the committee reports out. So if I was to move an amendment at committee, nobody would know about it. And especially if it was an amendment that didn't make it through to the bill, in theory, nobody would ever find out about that because it all happened behind closed doors in camera. That was November 24th was that deadline. So by November 24th, when those amendments would have been distributed to all members on the committee, on that date, the Conservatives would then have become aware of the amendment that was put forward by the bloc. Now, 3 days later, on November 27th, Mr. Speaker, the committee meets again. And suddenly, from out of nowhere, the member from Elgin St. Thomas decides he needs to filibuster the whole the whole committee. The only new information that that member would have had between the preceding meeting and the meeting on November 27th is becoming aware of all of the amendments that have been put forward by members. That's where we get to where we are now. Because the committee then, following his filibuster and starting the clause by clause, and after having listened to 23 witnesses, and by the way, it would have been 33 witnesses had they not filibustered, the minister even attended and answered questions directly as well. So then we get to this point. So now I hope the public understands. Bill went through second reading here. Bill goes to committee. Bill gets studied for over 3 meetings, over 8 hours worth witnesses. Minister arrives. Then the request goes out for amendments. Everybody submits their amendments to the committee. After all that happens, then suddenly from out of nowhere, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives show up today during our routine proceedings and suddenly say, we would like to ask the House for permission to tour the country to get feedback on this bill.
Amazing.
The ship had long sailed on the feedback.
Yep.
When the committee, the pre-committee, the subcommittee would have met to determine what the goals were in studying this bill, the committee would have had opportunities in it before the witnesses even showed up to say, I think we need to take this on the road and go and visit various different communities throughout the country. The committee members could have asked any of the witnesses or the minister for that matter, do you think it would be helpful for us to tour the country to ask about this? Do you think any of that happened? Do you think that happened once, Mr. Speaker? Because it didn't. It did not happen once. The only time that Conservatives suddenly demanded to be able to now delay the committee and the clause by clause to go tour the country came after they became aware of the amendment that had been put forward by the Bloc. So, Mr. Speaker, the question is why? And that all, what I told you there, that was all completely objective. That is all information that happened, that just occurred. Now I'll tell you what my opinion is to why they're suddenly trying to put the brakes on this. And the parliamentary secretary who spoke before me brought this up too. She made a very good point. She said they're divided. And now they're yelling, no, they're not. But here, maybe they will allow me to table some social media posts from their members that have contradicting views on that. I bet you they won't do that, just like earlier when this started. And the member, the parliamentary secretary to the government House leader said, well, why don't you guys want to work till midnight then? And they jumped up and they said, we want to work till midnight, of course, yeah. One of the members like, right on. And then moments later, within 20 seconds, the same exact parliamentary secretary stood up and said, okay, I ask unanimous consent that we stay till midnight to the rest of the session. All it takes in unanimous consent is one person to yell out no.
They all did.
They all did it. They all did it. That's what happened in this House. It's theater to them. It's theater to them. They don't understand what their role is in this House. They think their role is to obstruct and to stop at every possible opportunity anything that the government does. That's not their role, Mr. Speaker. Their role is to encourage people to make better legislation. You know, I gave a speech on this once not that long ago, Mr. Speaker. I gave a speech on this, and I talked, at the end of my speech, I gave the last 3 or 4 minutes talking about how these Conservatives are nothing like Flora McDonald that came from my riding, are nothing like Brian Mulrooney. I laid it out there and told them what I thought of them. You know what showed up? You know what showed up in my constituency office 2 days later? A portrait of Brian Mulrooney. And he said, Mark, keep giving those speeches, Brian.
Wow.
This is not the Conservative Party that existed when our parents were heavily involved in politics.
Right.
This is an extension much further right than the Reform Party. And you need not look at much more than what we've heard in this House today for support on that.
Yeah.
It's the reality of what we're dealing with. So we don't have a progressive or even just a Conservative Party anymore that genuinely believes in Canadians and wants to make this place better. We have a bunch of MPs that have come here under the blue color and the Conservative name and the Conservative logo, and all they want to do is obstruct all day long because they want this government to be able to absolutely accomplish nothing on behalf of Canadians, when in reality, their job is to actually try to make the lives of Canadians better by challenging the government, by suggesting when things can be done differently to make the circumstances for Canadians better, and they're not doing it. You know, I said moments ago, Mr. Speaker, I talked about the divide between the Conservatives. Well, I would like to point that out. I won't even bother to try to table these because I know I'll never get unanimous consent for that. But the reality is that the member who spoke before me from York Centre, it was a great speech. Well, you should ask the member from Elgin St. Thomas London South if he thinks the same thing. Yeah. Because the member from York Centre was basically saying this bill doesn't go far enough. And if you look at his private member's bill, you see why. Because he's actually calling for even tougher penalties, restrictions in there. But then you have the member from Elgin St. Thomas London South who calls this bill a censorship bill. That's the problem. The parliamentary secretary said it earlier. She said there's a divide, and there really is a divide. Maybe not in the members that happen to be sitting in this room right now, but there is a divide within that party on this issue. It's the only thing, Mr. Speaker, that explains why they refuse to let this go to clause by clause and to play out like every other bill does. It's the only thing that explains it. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would like to conclude with this. The member from Bowmanville North made a comment earlier. He made a comment about my faith. He made a comment about Liberals writ large. He made a comment about Liberals' approach to religious freedom and those that practice freedom. That member knows nothing about me. That member does not know where I was baptized, does not know what school I attended. He knows nothing about where I was married or the advice that from time to time I seek from my pastor. He knows nothing about that. He knows nothing about the school that my children go to and the religious teachings that they receive there. And you know why he knows nothing about that, Mr. Speaker? Because it's my choice. It's my faith. I keep my faith to myself because it guides me personally. I don't bring it in here and weaponize it like conservatives do, like that member does when he does his Restore the North tour of going around the country, trying to stoke fear and division amongst community members because he knows that he'll be successful at it and he can continue to grow that alt-right base that we see on the other side of the aisle. That's the reality, Mr. Speaker. I have no interest in coming into this place and divulging to everybody here what my religious beliefs are or how I practice faith, because our system is designed to specifically not allow that to be part of the debate in here, regardless of the fact that the Conservatives routinely try to bring that up in here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question and commentary. The honourable member for Kitchener South has.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I found most of that member's speech totally unnecessary. I'll explain it very succinctly. Conservatives are here to oppose bad laws. C-9 has become a bad law because of this bad amendment that the Liberals have agreed to clandestinely with the Bloc, as reported by the National Post. When the former chair of the Justice Committee said that he thinks some religious texts are hateful and should be banned, we found that appalling. We thought he was on his way out. He's since been elevated to cabinet, and apparently it is now the position of the government and the Prime Minister that some religious texts are hateful and need to be banned in Canada. I have a very simple question for this member. I have a very simple question for this member. Who was the Prime Minister when the religious exemption was put into Section 319?
The Honourable Chief Government Whip.
I regret that he found nothing in my speech to be of usefulness to him, but I would be lying if I suggested that I thought anything otherwise when I was giving it. I was trying to inform perhaps the public to get a better understanding and view of what is going on, what has happened, and how we ended up here today. To that member, to say that his job, the Conservatives' job, is to oppose legislation, well, he doesn't have the luxury, he doesn't have the benefit of those of us who have been here for many, many years, who have seen this over and over and over again, getting up and calling people trust fund babies like they used to refer to the previous Prime Minister, getting up personal attacks over and over and over. They've never actually offered anything of substance. They don't offer anything of substance because their entire And you think, and the parliamentary secretary of the House Leader said this earlier, you would think that they would have learned something after the last election, that Canadians actually want substance. They don't want what this party has been offering for 10 years.
The honourable member for Rimouski-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, we're looking forward for the government to put on to take a position. It's not too much to ask. They're delaying justice meetings to not move forward with this legislation. Now they're dithering. They don't know what's happening with their caucus. We are in such a mess of a situation. Religions are controlling our democracy. What world are we living in? Quebec has dealt with this. We have legislated unanimously. Hate speech must be exempted from what is already in the criminal code. This is rather clear. 75% of Quebecers agree with this. What we want to know from the member for Kingston and his government is that, do they agree with this motion and they're saying that they're going to agree with us, or are they going to back off?
For them, well, two things that I take issue with there, Mr. Speaker. If he had listened to what I said, he would have heard when I talked about the member from Elgin, London, Elgin North, I think it is, when he was filibustering the committee to prevent it from going. We were in clause by clause. You know, the Conservatives come in here and start this charade at the very last minute to try to delay the fact that they inevitably have to come to a conclusion on this, and they're going to have to vote on it. And some of them will be voting different ways, and they don't know how that's going to play out in their party. And that's what they're afraid of. But also, for the member to say that religion is influencing our politics, I can tell him that my religion does not influence my politics. It doesn't. My religion is my faith that I practice with the guidance of my pastor, that I do in the confidence of myself, my wife, and my family, and has nothing to do with this place.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I really do appreciate the comments of my colleague and friend. And I wanted him to expand upon the idea that, you know, when we have a flashback to the election just a number of months ago, when the Prime Minister and Liberal candidates across the country made a commitment towards bail reform. Bail reform that was supported by provinces, supported by law enforcement officers, Canadians as a whole. And when you take a look in terms of today, we have bail reform legislation, and the only thing that's preventing it from becoming law is the Conservative Party of Canada, just like the hate legislation that is supported by many. Can he provide his thoughts on how Canadians are victims of conservative self-serving interest?
The Honourable Chief Government Whip.
Well, this is what I was talking about earlier, Mr. Speaker, which is that they just obstruct. Like, they're so afraid that a law that is being called upon by so many throughout this country might actually get passed, and it might be a win for the government. That's all they're afraid of. You know, we don't take the same approach. And a perfect example is yesterday, the member from Kamloops, Thompson Caribou, had a private member's bill here. We thought it was a good bill. We stood up and voted for it. Our objective here is not just to oppose everything that Conservatives bring forward. Right. That's why that bill passed unanimously in this House yesterday, because we all stood up one by one. A Conservative bill. That member from Kamloops, Thompson Caribou, the name may have changed, can take the win. I don't care. It makes better policy, better laws for this country, and we're a better Canada as a result of that. But this all goes back to what I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, which is that Conservatives are only here to obstruct. They don't care if the bill is called upon by police and called upon by, like, they're mocking me now as I say this. All they care about is that we just don't get anything done so that they can say the government couldn't do anything.
Right.
Comments. Question and commentary. The Honourable Member for Mission, Matsqui, Abbotsford.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the reason we're here today is because the committee, we have put forward a motion to travel and discuss Bill C-9. At the heart of the request to travel is the agreement between the Liberal Party and the Bloc Québécois on Section 319(3) Clause B of the Criminal Code, which provides an exemption, and I'll quote, if in good faith they express or attempted to establish by an argument an opinion on a religious subject or an opinion based on a belief in a religious text. So my question to the member is very simple: does he believe that Bill C-9 will be strengthened by the elimination of this clause from the criminal code, or will it be weakened? Yes or no?
Honorable Chief Government Whip.
The member was going on a few minutes ago, Mr. Speaker, about how he wanted to stay here until midnight. When the parliamentary secretary said, I got an idea, why don't we stay here every day until midnight to get the work done for Canadians? That member jumped out of his seat and said, yeah, like that.
We have a point of order. I hope it's a point of order. The honourable member for Prince George East River.
It was a very clear question. He's asking for a yes or no answer. Will he simply answer the?
Not a point of order. That's a matter of debate. Honourable Chief Government Whip. Order. We have lots of time for questions and comments here. Let's stay on track. Member.
I apologize if I got caught up in demonstrating the hypocrisy of Conservatives, but I just couldn't believe that he stood up to ask me a question after what I witnessed earlier when he was so much in favor, when he was heckling about staying to midnight to get this done, and then he
Order. I hope this is a point of order. The honourable member for Mission Matsui.
The member is indicating something I did, in fact, not do in the chamber. I'll let the record stand. I did not speak up when
Order. A point of order has to be related to the standing orders or the usual practices of the House. We're into matter. Brad, order. We're into a matter of debate here. The Chief Government Whip has about 10 seconds if he wishes to finish his answer, unless he's finished. Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Speaker, I can tell you that members of the Liberal caucus actually came here today in anticipation that we are going to be debating the budget implementation bill. We are concerned about the issues that Canadians are concerned about. It's dealing with issues, for example, like the tax break to 22 million Canadians. It's dealing about the many ways in which the government is supporting Canadians and building a stronger Canada. I'm wondering if he can provide his thoughts as to why it is that we are actually not debating the budget today, but rather we're debating the Conservative agenda.
Order. I'll just invite members to, if they don't have the floor, just to not talk. You know, Chief Government Whip.
I wish I had an answer to that, Mr. Speaker, but unfortunately, I've spent 10 years here watching it day after day after day, listening to Conservatives just go on about trying to obstruct, about putting concurrence motions. We haven't even got to the point in routine proceedings where you can put a concurrence motion forward. I'm sure they'll do that too. But you know, I'll go back to the question from Mission Maskey Fraser Canyon. I only had 10 seconds left. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, time. Do you want to hear my answer? No, because of course you don't. Of course you don't. Of course they don't. Of course they don't. Because well, they're yelling time, Mr. Speaker. What is it?
Order. No, not from the top.
From the top.
Nous avons assez de temps pour.
We have enough time for a 30-second question. The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean, 30 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You don't know how discouraged people would be to see what's going on here today. In Quebec, we've already held this debate. The National Assembly is 100% behind the idea of repealing this defense from the criminal code. 75% of Quebecers are with the bloc on this. People would be really discouraged if they saw what's going on here today. Does my colleague agree that if the committee doesn't hear on this, if we can't work on this to get this through once and for all, isn't it only reasonable that this exception should be removed from the criminal code?
I've seen it for 10 years coming from Conservatives, but the reality is that, you know, the member from Mission Maskey Fraser Canyon said, why can't this just come back? And the reality is, why can't we just travel on it? The reality is that should have been brought up when they started discussing the bill, not when they were in the clause by clause phase. And it just leaves people to wonder, why are Conservatives doing this? And I'll leave it to the Canadian public to figure that out.
Resuming debate, please do débat. The honourable member for Brampton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in the chamber today to address Bill C-9 and Act to amend the Criminal Code, hate propaganda, hate crime, and access to religious or cultural places. This bill matters. This is an important bill. And Canadians deserve clarity, fairness, and honesty from their government. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives believe deeply in protecting every Canadian from hate, intimidation, and violence. We stand against hate crimes in every form. We stand with the communities that feel threatened. And we stand for the fundamental freedoms that define this country. Canada is a plural society. People of every faith, every culture, and every tradition live side by side. Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Jewish, Muslims, Buddhists, indigenous spiritual communities, everyone contributes, everyone belongs, everyone deserves safety. We believe every Canadian should feel safe walking into a temple, a gurdwara, a church, a mosque, or any other cultural or religious center. And they deserve the freedom to pray, celebrate, and gather without fear. Religious freedom is essential. It is not secondary. It is a core Canadian value. It is protected by the Charter, and it must never be undermined by vague or politically motivated legislations. But protecting freedom requires responsible drafting, and responsible drafting requires clarity. Bill C-9, unfortunately, does not provide that clarity. This bill expands definition of hate propaganda without precise thresholds or constitutional safeguards. Experts raised concerns, legal scholars raised concerns, law enforcement raised concerns, and the National Post reported extensively on these flaws, highlighting how big language risk selective enforcement, how investigators lack operational guidance, and how Canadians risk being silenced rather than protected. Mr. Speaker, when the country's major newspaper and legal experts sounds alarm, and any responsible government would pause and fix the issues. But this government did not. Instead, they push ahead prioritizing political messaging over legislative quality. They rejected conservative amendments. They ignored community advice. They disregarded charter warnings. Mr. Speaker, when the government proposes amendments to the criminal code on something as sensitive as the hate propaganda and hate crimes, the language must be exact. The law must be carefully crafted to target those who promote violence and genuine hatred, while shielding conditions from the risk of being criminalized for expressing opinion, beliefs, criticism, satire, or religious teaching that are the part of the legitimate democratic discourse. And then, Mr. Speaker, they try to block scrutiny where Canadians expect accountability most, the Justice Committee. Liberals filibustered. They obstructed meaningful debate. They prevented witnesses from fully presenting concerns. They treated legitimate questions as inconveniences. And incredibility, they disrupted the committee process to such an extent that committee clerk informed members that today's meeting has been cancelled because the government simply refused to let the work continue. Mr. Speaker, Canadian deserves better than a government that filibusters its own bill and grinds committee work to a halt. What kind of a confidence can Canadian have in the law when the government is afraid of its own committee hearings? Canada's strength is its pluralism, not in slogans, but in real lived experience. In neighbors of different faiths supporting each other, in families practicing different traditions under the same roof, in communities celebrating their culture without fear, pluralism requires trust. And trust requires laws that are fair, clear, and constitutional. Bill C-9 threatens that trust because vague laws do not protect our society, they weaken it. When religious groups, cultural organizations, or ordinary Canadians wonder if their speech or practices could be misinterpreted, fear begins to replace confidence. And when confidence erodes, the foundation of a pluralistic society cracks. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives support protecting places of worship, temples, gurdwaras, churches, mosques, synagogues, cultural centers, every sacred place. We support the right to worship freely and without intimidation. We support strong penalties for hate-motivated attacks. But we also support laws that work. Communities want real protection. They want scrutiny, resources, not flowery commitments. They want policing tools, not political theater. They want faster responses, not confusing legislation. Mr. Speaker, instead of developing a precise, enforceable, community-informed framework that strengthens prevention, enhance police capabilities, and sharply targets those who spread real hatred and violence, the government drafted a bill so broad, so unclear, and so poorly defended that experts, communities, and law enforcement alike cannot confidently explain how it will be applied. This is not a good governance. This is not how you protect a religious freedom. This is not how you protect or support a pluralistic society. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives will always stand against hate, but we will also always stand up for the Charter. We will defend due process. We will defend clear constitutional law. And we will defend the right of every Canadian to worship freely, speak freely, and live without fear. Bill C-9 does not meet these standards. It fails to give police clear tools. It fails to deliver confidence to religious communities. It fails to reflect the society we are proud to be. And it fails the test of transparency, especially when the government cancels committee meetings rather than faces scrutiny. Canada deserves laws that work. Our society deserves that is real. And every Canadian who values both safety and freedom deserves better.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to cut in for one last time here, but my colleague Amarjeet Gill's speech is about to be cut off because we're headed towards question period. Question period begins in the House of Commons at 2 o'clock. So when he finishes his speech, we're going to proceed with question period, and that will be the end of this debate on C-9. Thanks to everybody for watching. So I know there have been a few questions that have come in the meantime, and I want to just quickly respond to some of the general themes of those questions. People have, a few of you have asked about how Bill C-9 compares with what we've seen in the UK and what we can learn from what other countries are doing, and very concerning to see how this Liberal government seems to be trying to learn from some of the worst examples with amendments they're making to C-9 that would attack religious freedom. There are a lot of concerns that you've raised about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and also a lot of people asking in the questions, hey, what can we do? What can you do to address the situation? So once more, I'm going to encourage you to sign the petition that is linked. Sign the petition highlighting those concerns and share this information with others. Conservatives are forcing the issue on a Liberal bloc attack on religious freedom. Thanks for watching the debate today, and look forward to keeping you up to date as these conversations unfold in Parliament.